Great thing about solar canopies is typically you can fit twice as much in your car park than you can on your roof. At the moment, we can do about 80% of the man hours on the production line. The people would have, finished their woolies, gone for their shop and come in the next morning and there's a whole solar canopy there when they rock up the next day. And 7% of the cost is solar panels. The rest is structural steel, foundations, and you're installing 1,100 kilowatts worth of solar, which is like 400 parking spaces. And once you've done the foundations and the structural steel, right, which is probably like 20% of the work or 30% of the work, the remaining 70% is done 3 meters in the air from a scissor lift. You beeping forward at like half a meter a second when it's high, and it is so time consuming to do and so inefficient.
Just sat down with Will Beaumont from Canyon Solar. Now, we discussed, amongst other things, solar canopies. Now, if you don't know what that is, prepare yourself. A very interesting area, otherwise known as solar carports. Now, Will has a mechanical engineering background. He actually did a double degree, studied commerce as well. And then after a bit of a stint with Solgen and a couple of other companies, he got stuck into his own business, his own manufacturing plant, and he's actually kicking goals. Now, Will is a great combination of engineering prowess and commercial savviness from a business perspective, and this podcast was fantastic. It was actually one of the longest podcasts we've ever done. We kept on chatting. He's definitely coming back for part 2. Now, without further ado, sit yourself down, strap yourself in, and get ready for a very interesting conversation. But before I go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, subscribe to Greenwood Academy, where we offer online, in-person, free, and paid training. I'm talking with Will, and just off camera, he mentioned that he'd had a speaking engagement that I thought was going to be after this podcast. That's why we're having it so early, but he actually had it yesterday. Can you fill in the listeners what that was about and what you sort of covered and how you actually got to present?
Yeah, sure. It's an EV charging conference down in Melbourne, and it worked out really well because I was already coming down for the podcast. And yeah, I was mentioning before, it's kind of funny because if you think about solar canopies, EV charging isn't the first thing that comes to mind, but it's really important. And it was a fun speaking engagement. I don't speak that often, but it was a half an hour chat, and I was talking about how solar canopies are going to be a massive part of the future. And I was spending all this time talking about solar canopies and how I hate shade cloth. I was kind of like joking about shade cloth is just the worst thing ever. It's so ugly. Even a mother couldn't love shade cloth kind of vibes.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
it's
it's just no good. And it's kind of fun talking about it. And once I kind of got most of the people in the room convinced that solar canopies were going to be a big part of the future, it was then really easy to talk about, well, in that future, EV charging should be part of the solar canopy, and there's a really good handshake between sharing that infrastructure and making it really cost effective and making the customer experience really amazing. And the other thing that was kind of cool was we're talking about what the goal is of Canyon Solar and what the ambition is with solar canopies, because at the moment it's really defining a category and growing a category. It's quite a niche, but I see it being a big part of the future. And we were mentioning, what's Microsoft's big, hairy, audacious goal? What did they go out to achieve when they first started, and how did they align their vision? And I was asking a few of the audience members, and the big one was, what their kind of goal was a computer in every house in America. That was their goal, and it was really succinct and clear, and just gave a real insight into the impact that Microsoft wanted to have, and obviously have now. And our goal's quite similar. It's we want a solar canopy in every car park in Australia and overseas. So it's the same very simple goal, and yeah, hopefully we can achieve it.
Look, it's a really interesting point you mentioned about you're talking about solar canopies, and I want you to define what you mean by canopy, because I hear a canopy and I have a particular image in my mind. Yeah. So what does canopy mean to you?
We kind of tried to coin solar canopy. I kind of made it up. I mean, people call them solar shade structures, which has too many S's, and it's just too much of a, you're eating like a large burger when you try and explain what a solar shade structure is.
Nice.
That's technically what people call them. I like the word solar canopy because it's shorter, and the end of the day, it's about user experience. And a solar canopy sounds like a nicer product. It sounds like something I want to interact with. It's a different, our product's quite different to everyone else's. So I wanted to have a different name and something that's, a slightly different category to the, more industrial solar shade structures, very functional. They just do this thing. Solar canopies can do anything. And even if you look at the name of Canyon Solar or Canyon in general, Canyon doesn't really mean anything. A lot of people ask me like, why do you call it Canyon? Like why? And I'm like, well, all the other companies have really engineering heavy names, and I'm an engineer, so I can pay us out.
Love it.
But you know what I mean? Like they're, not to like, I like our competitors, but like there's SRAC and Solar Carparks Australia and all those companies, and they're good companies, but like what do they do? Well, obviously that thing, which is solar shade. But Canyon can be anything, and it it's a bit more emotive. You think of the Grand Canyon and the shade structures.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and the environment, and like a lot of companies are starting to rename themselves in the industry. So you would have seen like Smart Commercial Solar, now Smart Commercial Energy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they've just changed their name. And same thing with like Next Tracker is now like, I think it's Next Energy. And there's this kind of shift in the industry where it's a bit more not just about solar, it's about all sorts of things, EV charging, batteries, just energy in general. And then we'll probably have to change our name at some point as well, away from Canyon Solar to Canyon something else, or just Canyon. But yeah, we want to do all sorts of things. It's not just solar canopies, it's probably going to be EV charging, batteries, all these kind of integrated services. And that's why we've kind of, had a slightly ambiguous name, because we wanted to create a category. We wanted a name that allowed us that flexibility to do it.
How important to you is getting the correct name? Like for a business.
I think it's pretty important. Like you want something you can get around. Like we actually, when I first started the company, I called it a pretty lame name called Argent Energy, or Argent, which is in French means silver. And it was just a bit wanky and hard to...
Very boutique.
Yeah, and it was like, we have nice looking solar canopies and they're really architecturally designed. But as you know, in especially the commercial solar and battery industry, it's very commercially driven and it's very price driven. And if you have a fancy name that makes you seem a little bit costly, it just doesn't float well. And I just didn't like the name. It's like, is the T silent or not silent? It was kind of hard to work out. So I changed to Canyon, and I really like Canyon bikes. I don't know if you cycle.
No,
There's a brand called Canyon, and they're super cool. And they are also similar to Canyon Solar in that you buy the bike fully built. So when you buy a bike, like, for example, I got a Giant, you go to the bike store, and they've got the bike and they put the wheels on and they service it and they do that whole thing. And then you obviously pay that margin at the bike shop to buy the bike. Whereas Canyon, you go online, you order this bike, it comes in a box, everything's on it apart from the wheels. You turn the handlebars, put the wheels on, and you've got a bike.
Okay.
So there's also some links to other, I really like that brand. And it's also funny that, they also do effectively a ready-made bicycle like our ready-made solar canopies.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Name is in the country. It's not really. It's
New South Wales?
Yeah, New South Wales. It's about an hour and a half south of Sydney. Beautiful spot down there. I had two older sisters who went to a school around the corner, and I went to primary school down there. I loved it. My family still live in the same house that I grew up in.
Wow.
Down there, and funnily enough, we're like a kind of big Greek wedding or big Greek family. My older sister, who also happens to be the chief of staff at Canyon Solar, is currently building a house on my parents' block of land. So they're subdividing and building a place in Mittagong. So it's all quite close and family orientated, which is really nice.
So that really, when you started talking about your sister actually building a house on your parents' land, I started thinking of extended families, how it used to be the norm. I'm half Serbian, and like you look at the Serbs and the Italians and the Greeks and a lot of the Asian communities, they had these extended families. So is obviously family is very important to you.
Yeah, it's great. We're all really close. We're also all involved in business, and it's funny with business because, much to my mum's kind of frustration, there's a lot of business chat in our family. And my mum's kind of involved in the business, but not as much. She's more of she comes back from a nursing background. But it's a great excuse to hang out when you can mix business and pleasure, I think. You talk about a bit of business, what's going on, and there's a lot of scheming going around the dinner table, which, I find really fun.
Scheming?
Always a new business idea, that you can start.
So that's effectively what you're talking about at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, especially because, like I said, my older sister, or one of my older sisters, is the chief of staff, so she's really involved in it. My old man's one of the main investors in Canyon Solar.
Wow.
And it's kind of cool as well. So I explain it like it's like the mafia, where our factories in the Southern Highlands, where we manufacture everything, but we've basically taken over one of the sheds at my old man's factory, and he manufactures his own product, which is a steel purlin. And it's its own patented product, but it's perfect because he rolls it on his production line, and then it finishes and then goes into the start of our production line in our factory.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's just like such a good handshake because, it's like a custom purlin now. We're actually getting a custom one to do these ultra long spans. It can roll to length. It gets punched and pressed and labelled and everything. So it's a really easy kind of automation you can have between the two companies.
As a child, were you the classic kid who wanted to know how things worked and broke them apart and tried to put them back together, sometimes successfully, sometimes not?
Yeah, I think I was. I've always loved, I had a go-kart growing up, for example, which was so fun. That was always breaking down.
A motorised one?
Yeah, motorised one. Wow. Had a little 6.5 horsepower kind of Honda motor on it. Yeah, which was great, and I kept blowing it up because especially when you go around the corner, sometimes the oil kind of went away and you'd seize the engine or the centrifugal clutch would go. There's all sorts of issues with it. And I remember when I was at luckily the school I went to had metal tech as a course, which I thought was so good. And I showed a lot of restraint by not doing it in year 12 because I knew that if I did metal tech and in year 12 you do a big project and everyone was building these sick off-road go-karts. And I was like, I'm just going to spend all my time doing that. And I know I won't do any of my other subjects. So I quit. But in year 11, as a little side project, I had this go-kart and I put a 250cc twin-cylinder motorbike engine on the back. And it was pretty sweet. It had some exhaust pipes that went out to the side. And when you'd rev it, it would glow red and spit flames. But it was so overpowered. I didn't get out of second gear, It was just a ridiculous thing for basically a basic go-kart.
Oh, that sounds like a coffin on wheels.
Yeah,
to me.
I know. Yeah,
wow.
it was definitely. I'm surprised looking back. My parents were cool with me doing that, but maybe they didn't know what I was doing.
Did you have a bit of land in the family home?
Yeah, land. We had 3 acres, so nothing really, but enough to fang a go-kart. Around the perimeter a few times, for sure.
Now, what about mentors at school? Did you have any teachers that really had I always ask this of the guests. Any teachers who had a really decent impact on you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really liked physics when I was at school. Physics is probably the closest I think you can get to engineering, to be honest. In a kind of high school context. I had this physics teacher and he was amazing. He was so passionate about what he did. He was so interesting. He was super nerdy, but in a cool way. It was his thing. And I remember him talking about lithium-ion batteries for the first time and the energy density problems you have.
Wow.
And all sorts of really cool foundational things that I touched on again and again later on when I did engineering at university. I found it fascinating. So I think, he definitely gave me, that was kind of my first formal introduction to kind of more engineering topics and parabolas and velocities and, all that kind of stuff. I really liked physics, and I thought Mr. Kennard, I think it was, was an awesome teacher.
It sounds like the mechanical engineering. I mean, obviously, there's a few different engineerings you could have picked, like electrical, civil, mechanical, et cetera, mechatronics. Yeah. It sounds like, though, with your passion for the go-karts and, mechanical was probably a natural choice.
Yeah, mechanical's really cool. I mean, there's always fights between the different engineering classes, right? Like civil engineers are dumb because, they don't deal with anything that moves and it's just, concrete and steel.
Sorry to our civil engineer listeners. That's funny.
But like there's always those, I guess niggles that people have between the different kind of engineering classes. Yeah, I think mechanical engineering's really interesting, and there's a lot of stuff that's adjacent to renewables, probably more like, not that I do wind, but we did a lot of wind in some of the renewable subjects. I think if I had my time again, I kind of, when people, because I obviously meet people out and they, say I do solar and everyone goes, oh, did you do electrical or did you do this? But like in our system, 95% of what we do is really more mechanical rather than electrical. Maybe mechatronic would have been like a good mix
I was thinking
doing a bit of both, but you look at a solar canopy, for example, and 7% of the cost is solar panels. The rest is structural steel, foundations, all the other things that go into it, which are not really electrical or directly electrical. So I think, mechanical was definitely a really good grounding for me, especially where I've gone in my career.
So is a good engineer, is it nature or nurture?
It's a really good question. Like I had, out of all my mates that did engineering, almost all of them didn't pursue that after university. A lot of them went into finance or all those kind of things. So I think regardless, it's a really good degree to do. And I think it's definitely like nurture, or like I'd say it's probably more like nature in terms of I really like mechanical things and I really want to do those things, and I was always keen on building stuff. And my other friends used those degrees, did the degrees and did really well in it, but are not at all interested in the mechanics of how a car works or what steel grade things are. And the good thing is you can easily apply what you learn in engineering to finance, and then they go do that. Absolutely. So you get this big split in the road almost, where it's like you all do engineering, and like a lot of my mates did a lot better in terms of marks than me, but I was just so focused on the actual mechanics of things, and they kind of use it as a good launch pad to go into careers they're probably getting paid a lot more money than me now.
The thing is, it seems that engineers are taught certain skills, the ability to critically analyse, logical skills that are applicable in any bloody profession. Because I've met so many engineers who go, I study engineering. Now I'm head of IT at I think it was a perfume company, and then someone else is doing it. So it's problem solving. You're taught problem solving, critical thinking, which is applicable to bloody everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and you learn to really enjoy that space, like having a problem and really taking it back to first principles thinking and going, how do I solve this? Like, what are my actual constraints? What are some different, what are my objectives? Like really applying a bit of a scientific method to problems. And you're right, it doesn't just contain to the physical world in terms of, physical objects that you deal with. It's all sorts of problems that you can apply that same technique to, and it's super powerful. Like we interviewed for some engineers at the start of last year, and we actually ended up hiring 2 mechanical engineers, funnily enough. But one of the tests we did, which I thought was really interesting, was we basically gave them a problem that was pretty much impossible to solve.
Oh, nasty people.
which is pretty nasty.
That is nasty.
But the kind of premise was, we'll give them this problem and we'll see how they do. Is there someone I enjoy solving problems with? Like when you don't really know what the answer is and it's really hard, how do they think about it, and do they enjoy this space of not knowing? and then going, oh wow, I don't know the answer, but let's strip it back and let's look at this, and oh no, that doesn't work, and or do they go, oh, I don't know the answer, and do they get down about it and negative?
Right.
And it was a really cool test, and the two people we hired, like everyone got the wrong answer. Obviously, it's impossible, or it's very difficult. But I was watching them solve the thing, and I was like, I want to be in the trenches with you.
Yeah,
we're going to have problems on site, and we're going to have to work through things, and I want you to be in my corner, and let's work through it together. So it was a really cool test.
That's fantastic. And I was thinking also too that if you're presenting with a problem that is really hard or impossible to solve, the process sometimes allows you to see solutions to other problems and other products or the other scenarios. Like if I'm presenting with a problem of how do I move this laptop without using my two hands, I might come up with this is a really bad
example.
Bad example. Strike that from the record. You see what I mean? In that process, other truths are sometimes revealed.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
You're not just solving. Yeah, it opens up all sorts of doors that you didn't know were possible. And you can apply that same solution to different industries, and even like it's fun as a sounds a bit like a wanker, but you quite often you like zoom out, especially when you're kind of founding a company and you're trying to think, well, what are the mega trends? And I think it's just a really cool lens. And I remember going through a StartMate course, and they were talking about, look at mega trends. Like, what are the big trends that are happening in the industry or just macroeconomic environment, and kind of extrapolate that and go, okay, cool. Because of this trend that's happening, how might it impact a particular industry in 3-5 years down the track? And then it's a really good lens to work out, well, what should I be building? So I'll give you an example, and that one they gave I thought was really interesting was, for example, the people that founded Uber. And when Uber was founded, smartphones weren't really a thing. Most people had their little Nokia they'd play Snake 2 on, but, they didn't have the GPS technology, they didn't have the apps to do it. But they kind of went, well, the mega trend is everyone will have a smartphone in the future. That's a bet we're making, and, what we can see is that's the future that's going to exist. And what should we build now that is going to be a big part of that future? So they didn't wait until everyone had a smartphone and then go, oh, let's build Uber. They went, well, let's build this now. It's going to take us 2 to 3 years to build it and scale it anyway. And when we launch, we'll be launching into a completely new future.
So that's not just about understanding or crystal ball gazing in regards to trends. That's also timing.
Yes.
Because you can have the best idea, but if your timing is off, it's useless as, dare I say, urinating in the wind.
Yeah. And there's, I'm sure there's, so many companies that have been the right idea at the wrong time, and they just haven't been successful because, imagine if I tried to launch solar canopies 10 years ago when panels were 10 times the price, wouldn't stack up, but all these things have happened that have been really lucky with the timing. And, the mega trend that we've kind of really latched onto and is becoming much bigger is prefabrication.
Yep.
That's the mega trend. And if you look at the construction industry in general, people are doing whole houses that are prefabricated.
I was going to say, they've been doing that in America for a very long time.
Yeah.
Giant factories, woe to go, and they just roll this house.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's really cool when like prefabricated toilets, like I used to work at Lendlease and we did toilets there that were all built off site and fully done. And there's a massive trend there because, labour is obviously extremely expensive, especially in Australia, and even just availability. Like most of the projects we do are remote New South Wales, and you're trying to get a crew out there to install it. And it's like they're so expensive and, they're really hard to schedule in. So our kind of thing is, well, the limit we're trying to push is how much can we prefabricate our system? How much can we do on the production line? At the moment, we can do about 80% of the man hours on the production line.
Wow.
And it's like, can we do 90, 95? Like, what is the limit? What is that hard limit before you go, well, my technicians that are on more like $30 an hour, that's kind of what their going rate is. Like, they're more efficient and they're lower cost compared to my electrician on site that's probably about $150 an hour once you pay for their living away from home allowance and their travel. And they're less efficient because they're working in a scissor lift in the heat. So that's like really latching onto that mega trend of prefabrication's a thing. It hadn't been applied to a solar canopy yet. It's been applied to ground mount. You look at 5B, they're doing a really good job with prefabrication there. Solar pod do it in rooftop systems. And we kind of went, well, solar canopies are so expensive and, 40% of the cost is labour. It's like if you want to attack a cost group, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, good point. All right, we'll come back to, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about your business and the industry in general. But I want to get back to that, the chronological. You've done your mechanical engineering.
Sure. Yeah.
And straight out of uni, what's your first job?
I worked at Lendlease. So
huge company.
Yeah, big company. I've got this running joke where all my friends are called Will. So one of my good friends, Will, actually already worked at Lendlease, who was a civil engineer. And he helped me get the job. You tease him about
that, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He knows where he stands. He kind of got me on board at Lendlease, and it's such a good place to cut your teeth. Like I really, really loved working there. You just fully get thrown in the deep end. You learn about the whole construction industry, how everyone fits in terms of consultants, subcontractors, project managers, developers, designers. There's this whole kind of ecosystem that you become a part of and understand what everyone's trying to optimize for and what everyone's kind of, incentives are. And you just learn so much about how things, you used to uni where it's like, oh, it says this, then this happens. And it's just not like that in construction.
Yeah.
You say this and it's in your contract and it doesn't happen. Why not? I remember that being so shocking to me that people wouldn't do that was in their contract.
That's the engineer talking.
Yeah. I was like, but it's there in black and white. Like it says it's your responsibility. So there's a lot of just psychology. And looking back, I mean, I do think about the poor subby who's had 20 years experience, who's working at Lendlease as a tier 1 contractor. And there's some snotty-nosed grad engineer who's telling them what to do. It's it's kind of funny to think, but yeah, it was amazing experience, and I was really lucky. I had a really good construction team, and because I did mechanical engineering, which was a bit of a rare one compared to everyone else who had civil backgrounds.
Yep.
Like mechanical engineer, you are on services, so that's like hydraulics, so all the plumbing and stuff, fire, electrical and mechanical, so all the air conditioning. So it was really good. I had my own niche. And when I first got there, my manager had just gone on maternity leave. So I was just kind of running the show.
So what was your title? Yeah.
So I was just a site engineer.
Yeah, right. But what's that mean?
It basically means you're on site every day and you're at the cold face making sure the subcontractors effectively do their scope.
And you're 22, 23?
Yeah, I was 20, I think I was 24 23 or 24. 5-year degree, and I had a gap year, so it took me a while to get into the workforce. But it was really good, and we're doing like a 40-level apartment block in Circular Quay, kind of vibe. So it was big. It was a big block. So there's a lot of work to get done. But
you did
like I said, it was really fun.
well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did commerce as well.
So you combine. You did 2 degrees.
Yeah, I did a double degree. Yeah, but it's good. It's good value for money because an engineering degree, at least when I did it, was 4 years, and if I wanted to do commerce with it, it was 1 more year.
Wow.
So it's really good.
But a big workload.
A big workload, but I mean, I really enjoyed it. If anyone's listening, working out what they want to do, engineering's great, but it's obviously very mass focused and, problem, and work through it. I found the business side or the commerce side just really cool because it's just a different way of using your brain. It was all about how to, you had to be able to write a short essay and you had to research economic environments and organizational behavior and all these other kind of more soft skills, which I thought was really interesting. So I quite liked breaking it up and being like, wow, I've got this hectic, engineering maths course I'm doing. And then here I am doing, something that's completely different, talking about organizational structuring and theory and, behavioral economics, so cool and so different.
But the financial side, though, that's almost, and you see a lot of the people who are involved in finance, they bloody love their maths because it is basically all maths, isn't it, the financial side?
Yeah, it is. And like I did economics as my major in my commerce degree, so I didn't do finance. So economics is like there's a little bit of maths, but especially when you come from engineering, it's child's play. Like you're doing very little economics. Very little maths. But yeah, it's people love the numbers. And look, as I've gone into business, I've kind of leaned way more into the financial side, especially because we're looking to raise money and do this, that, and the other. And I'm kind of, trying to work backwards and be like, oh, what are all these finance things that I kind of touched on that I'm now really getting into?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that like, in the finance industry, people are using all these acronyms and people use acronyms to appear smarter than they really are. And also to sort of talk to a specific group, like, if we talk finance, MPV, IRR, ROI, and all those others, and you go, oh, if you don't know what the heck, but when explained, it's like, oh, that's not bloody that hard, is it?
Yeah.
So, but it is maths based, the time value of money and all. I think obviously all the other stuff, the decision-making processes of when you implement things based on, as you said, organisational behaviour, human psychology, that's hugely important as well in business.
Oh, massively. And look, I think the best, like I'll put my hand up, definitely not the best engineering student. I got through, there's a lot of people they're smarter than me, definitely. But I think one thing that's super valuable in your career and especially if you're starting your own business is if you can have enough of a technical grounding to know what you're talking about, and also just be able to interact with people and understand what their circumstances are and the way they're going to be looking at it in their lens. It's really, really powerful. And there's a lot of people that are really good at the technical side, and there's a lot of people that are really good at that other side in terms of interacting with people and chatting with them. But like being able to bridge the gap and do both, or at least understand both, well, I think has been super powerful, and it's probably why I've been able to start a company, and not be the smartest guy in the room, definitely. But I know enough of the technical side, and I know enough of the commercial and the sales side, and I can communicate that to both sides.
Have you got good EQ, would you say?
I think, probably. I'd like to think so. One thing I found is pretty cool, and how we got our sales is I'm very passionate about our product, right? Like I really enjoy talking about it and getting into the weeds of it. And I think that's what got us our first sales. Like they're kind of just, it's almost because they don't know. Like you can contract whatever you want, and like this, it's your first project, right? How are we going to do a good job? But you just I just wanted that project so bad. I've been, slaving away for 3 years just trying to get the product to a point where we could sell the first project. And it was kind of like, I will do anything for you. Like I will do a good job if it means I lose money on it. If it means I have to be down there every week for the next 2 months, which is what happened, like we'll deliver a good product.
So it sounds like you could see the end result.
Yeah, I wanted to make it work so bad. And it kind of goes back to that problem-solving thing, that there's a solution there.
So do you believe that you could create your own reality?
Yeah, I think...
Like action follows thought, that kind of stuff?
I think, look, to a certain extent, yes. Like as long as your reality is achievable from a first principles perspective, like it's something that can actually be achieved, you'll be able to get there.
Yeah.
And it took us so long. We're almost like Thomas Edstein in terms of how long it took to get our product right. Like we spent I reckon the first 10 projects we did, we lost money, and it was slower to do than an in-situ system, and we had all these problems, but every project was getting a bit better, and then we finally crossed that threshold where it worked and the unit economics were, well, we actually make really good money out of each project. And that was like so validating that it worked, and then the cool thing is you build a really big moat, because what we're doing is super hard to do. There's so much, I'm glad I was so ignorant when I started a business in terms of, oh, cool, prefabrication.
You wouldn't have started if you'd known.
I'll make money in the next 12 months. And, it's been 4.5 years, and hopefully we're profitable this year. We're looking, close to that, and definitely next year. But, it's been a long process to get there, but it's almost like the Olympics. You see a guy win a gold medal And like they've done 4 years of hard work to get there. And you know, that's where we're kind of like, we've put so much work in, and you know, it's kind of game day, and it's like, we can't wait to be profitable and stand our own 2 feet. And yeah, the amount of work to get there is huge, but it's hard to copy.
Let's step back a little bit again.
Sorry.
No apologies, because I can see that unbridled enthusiasm which is required to be in business. I think like there's certain, I think with business it's a nature versus nurture thing too. There's certain people who are more fit for business than others.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I'm an employee. I had my own business many years ago.
Yeah.
For 2 years. I broke even. I was shit at it, and I thought to myself, "Well, no, it's not for me. I don't want that. I want to be an employee who hopefully contributes in a productive manner, both for the company and for myself." So it's a really interesting one. So you're at Lendlease.
Yep.
How long were you there for?
Not long. I've never worked at any company. I've worked at Canyon Solar the longest out of any of the companies. I was there for 2 years, basically. So I pretty much just finished the grad program. And yeah, like I said, I thought it was amazing. It was a really good project to be part of. But I was just itching, you know, like I really wanted to, I get paid out for this a lot with my mates. I was like, I want to get into renewables. There's so much happening. I had this big FOMO, and construction's great, but it's obviously not like the cutting edge of innovation. Really, you're pouring concrete slabs and you're building apartments, and it's good.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a bit slower.
Well,
on the innovation front.
When did that renewable energy interest happen? Was that earlier on? Because it sounds, because you haven't mentioned that so far. When did it sort of go shit, or no, maybe not shit, but wow, renewables, eureka! I want to get involved.
Yeah, I was always interested in it at university, and like, you know, my thesis in my final year was like hydrogen cooktops. You know, so I was like, how do you, you know, basically get solar panels to make, you know, use a PEM electrolyzer to turn that into hydrogen and then combust that and use it as a cooktop. And it was kind of like, instead of wood, what everyone uses, or gas, it's like a renewable thing, which was very hard and didn't really work, but it was a really fun process to go through. So I was interested in it. Like, I think heaps of my friends, I was also like, I want to go work at Tesla. That was my kind of thing. I was like, they're doing so much cool stuff. Like, they're really innovating. And obviously that meant moving to America. I kind of, you know, got a job at Lendlease and it was really good. And then I was like, you know what? I want to go move over to America. That sounds like a really fun thing to do. And I actually just quit my job at Lendlease with nothing lined up, which is very classic me. Because I was like, you know, when you're in a job, it can sometimes be so hard to be like, I need to do my job and then also apply for other jobs and do this and do that. And I think sometimes, like, I definitely got into the point where, like, it just doesn't happen almost, because you're not spending enough time looking for that job. So you're like 6 months later, you're like, I'm still in this job. If I just quit, then I could fully dedicate myself to finding a new job. And I'm like, I'm young enough and you know, I can hustle enough that I'll find another job. So that's what I did. I quit my job. I had 6 months off. I actually went over to America.
Oh, you did go to America?
Well, not really. Like, I went over there and checked it out, and I had some friends that worked in San Francisco, and like, I thought it was so cool, but it was just, it was super hard. I'm just some grad who'd quit his job. I didn't really have a skill set that they were hiring for, and Tesla weren't hiring at the time. And I was trying all these different ways and whatever company. And then one of my friends introduced me to a solar company in Australia that was hiring. And I'd kind of been off for 6 months, kind of working, you know, in construction in general. And I kind of like, oh, well, this is what I want to do. I want to get into renewables, and this is a really good stepping stone to do that. So why don't I just take this job in commercial solar? And if nothing else, it will help me get a job in the future if I want to, you know, go into more of the startup space. So that's what I did.
Who can you mention the company?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. So a company called Solgen.
Oh,
Energy.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know them. But
I remember we used to deal with them.
Yeah,
in the early days.
Yeah, and they were like a kind of pioneer in commercial solar.
They got pretty big.
Yeah, they got really big. Yeah, I mean, they were the biggest commercial installer in Australia. And I think they kind of cut their teeth with all the government grants that were coming through with the like Schools of the Future or whatever that kind of happened after the GFC, and they did a lot of solar through that. And then and now it's owned by AGL. But yeah, it was a really fun place to kind of get into solar panels for the first time, and it was all kind of still kind of new and different.
What was your role there?
I started off in the tenders team. So it was kind of like a bit of, the two things again, like a bit of technical side, but a bit of commercial and sales side and communicating to the client, which I found really fun. I found it hard though. Like I just remember working really, really hard on these tenders, and tenders tenders are tough. Anyone that does tenders, hats off to them. But yeah, you got these big returnable schedules. It's all kind of arm's length away. You don't necessarily have a relationship with the end client trying to respond to this tender spec. And I remember doing heaps of late nights there. And the thing I found really hard is that most of the tenders we lost.
Oh yeah, that's so frustrating.
It sucks. And like you wouldn't even really know about it. Like it's, you kind of like sometimes the project wouldn't even go ahead. You would, 6 months later, they don't even tell you and you get wind that someone else has won it. And I just remember being like, this is so hard. I'm doing so much work to try and respond to these tenders. And I kind of had two feelings. One is I wasn't increasing the amount of renewable energy because I was just responding to a tender and someone's going to win it and they're going to go do the solar. And I remember thinking like, this is cool, but I'm just trying to improve my company's, share of the market at the expense of another company's market share. So I'm not actually increasing the amount of solar necessarily in the industry. So I remember feeling a bit like that. And then the other thing I kind of felt, and this is definitely, even more so the case now in rooftop solar, is it's extremely hard to compete because everyone has the same stuff. You're like, oh, cool. So I do this tender and you have the same panels, the same inverter, you use the same electrician, and you like magically package it all up and it's meant to be a more compelling offer than all the 10 other people that are effectively offering the same solution.
You got a value add though, don't you?
You got a value add, but it's percentages, it's really, we can deliver it with this kind of thing, or we're going to reduce our margin to be a bit better, or we've thought around this workaround of how we minimize the DC cable length and run it at a high voltage, but it's all really minor stuff. And I just remember thinking like, how do we create something that's differentiated? Like I just found it hard in rooftop solar. And like at the end of the day, obviously solar is all about saving money. It's not the sexiest thing.
In the commercial sphere, absolutely.
Exactly. And if you're all offering the same product and it can get installed the same way, then you just go with the cheapest one, ultimately. So that's what I found really difficult. Just being like, just getting, heartbroken by losing all these tenders. Like I remember one year, I reckon out of the whole year I won one tender, It's like, what have I got to show for my 12 months of work? Not much. And that's why I was kind of like, I want to do something where we have a really differentiated product.
So after Solgen, you went, is this when the idea of your own business started?
Yeah, I was kind
of fermenting.
Yeah, I was kind of like, cool, that was really good renewables experience, and I was like, I'm going to work in a startup. Was my kind of vibe, but I wasn't yet ready to take the leap to starting my own business. And
the business is in your family. Your father has got a factory. He was obviously running the factory. At that stage. So you were exposed to what goes on and the conversations around the dinner table.
Yeah, and I'd had a lot of conversations with my old man about solar and where where's the niche, where's the opportunity that you can do something and make something and grow it. Same thing. I kind of just quit my job. I was like, I'm over working here. I want to do something different. So I quit my job. I didn't really have much lined up. I interviewed at a company called Jolt. Do you know Jolt? They do like EV charging with advertising.
Okay. No, I was thinking of someone else. I was thinking it was an EV conversion company.
Oh, you're thinking of, this starts with J as well. Yeah, Jana or like...
that takes old Land Rovers and what have you, whacks in a Tesla powertrain.
Yeah, that's a cool company.
That is a bloody cool company.
Yeah, they've done a mini moke recently as well,
wow.
which it looks like a rocket ship.
Oh my gosh.
Like a 500 kilo, supercar.
Wow.
This one's like an EV charging / advertising company, and it was kind of a cool premise.
Let's step back a bit.
Yeah, sorry.
EV, no, apologies. You said EV charging company, EV charging advertising company?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So basically what they do is public EV charging, even to this day, is kind of famously loses money, right? Like no one makes money. Maybe Tesla do, but like most companies don't make money out of their public charging assets.
Right.
And there's basically two reasons for that. One is they're extremely expensive, especially DC chargers and the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff that goes in.
The fast chargers.
And the utilization rate's too low. So you kind of screwed on both sides. They're really expensive, and you don't actually get that much revenue for them. So they're hard to make money out of. And what Jolt do, it's almost a plug for Jolt. It's not meant to be. Is they go, well, instead of trying to make money out of the EV charging, let's co-locate it with advertising, and we'll actually make more money out of advertising, but it'll help subsidize the cost of the EV charging.
Gotcha.
So for them, their revenue split is 80% comes from advertising revenue and 20% comes from EV charging revenue.
Okay. So it's similar to the flock camera and the Ring camera system in America, where effectively they're giving these cameras for free, but they make the money off the data they collect.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's almost like, I think a good analogy is like the bus shelter. You've seen all the companies that put the bus shelters in. They've got the advertising thing in, they put them in for free and it's all good. But, you're just getting a glass bus shelter, but they're making really good money out of that, 70-inch advertising screen that's showing digital ads.
That until, of course they do. Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So that was their business model.
Yeah.
And you're there for how long? And what were you doing there again?
Actually, I didn't even. I kind of went through the interview process and I kind of negotiated a bit hard, probably in hindsight. But I also had this burning going through that interview process and getting exposed to what they were doing. It's kind of like I just want to do my own thing. Like I was kind of going through the interview process and I was meeting with the founder and we were talking about it. And to be honest, I was looking at it, I was like, advertising is cool, but it's not. Like I'm not an advertising guy, it doesn't get me out of bed thinking, we can put all these advertising screens in. The EV charging part was cool.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm just going to, it would be cool to work here, but I've just got this idea about solar canopies and I really want to pursue it. And the way that came up was...
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear this.
So what happened was I was kind of on the way out. So I gave my notice at Solgen that, I wanted to leave, didn't really have anything lined up. And before I left, I went out with my manager at the time, a guy called Paul Robertson, who was really good engineer who I have a lot of respect for, who still works at AGL. Anyway, we went out to a manufacturing facility that was actually, turned out, was my old man's business partner in another random business.
Such a small world.
It's a small world. Like I said, it's the mafia. And we went out there and we're kind of, going like, how do we make solar canopies better? They're so expensive. It's a hard sell. Maybe we can reduce the structural steel cost. So let's talk to some manufacturers. And we went out there and we're kind of going, maybe we could, could we get the steel from overseas, or what's your fabrication costs and standardization? We're kind of looking at it with probably the wrong hypothesis in general, which is we need to strip out procurement costs to make this thing lower cost. And when I was there, the managing director of the company, Aidan Cavender, went, have you guys looked at doing a prefabricated system? Because he asked us what the cost was for the labour. He's like, what's the overall labour cost? And we're like, did some numbers, about 40% of the cost.
Wow.
Which was less than what the structural steel was. And he's like, why don't you do a prefabricated system? And it was just like this light bulb moment. I was like, that is such a great idea.
Yeah, wow.
Like it's so obvious, everyone else is doing prefabrication. They did these massive HVAC systems for data centres that were all built in-house. They'd do 15 metres long, pipes you can walk through, huge HVAC systems, and they just bolted the connections together on site. And I was like, if they can do that, which looks so much harder than a solar canopy, why couldn't you do it with a solar canopy? So I remember getting the train home that day and I got a call from him and he was like, I can't stop thinking about this, prefabricated solar thing. Do you want a job? Do you want to come work here and we'll try and do it here? And I kind of thought about it for a little bit and then I went, you know what, why don't I start my own company? I'll get you guys to manufacture it.
Wow.
And that's what we did.
Wow. And that was, so that was what, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
Yeah, that was 2021. So 4.5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That all happened. And it was really cool. It was super exciting. And that's, basically the path we went down to go, well, let's can't be that hard. Let's go try and build one.
So you're sort of following your father's footsteps in regards to manufacturing.
Yeah. And
wow.
I know software's all the rage and, wouldn't be a podcast in 2026 without talking about AI, but AI is cool and there's obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but I'm a physical components guy. I really like building stuff, I like to see it. And especially something that's more of a production line where it's just rolling out and you have this continuous improvements. Like, how can I make the next one better? How do I make the next one better? And you can scale it over 1,000 or 10,000 units.
Yeah.
That's super cool to me. And that's what I think about. And that, software's really cool and, it's probably going to have a much bigger impact really on the world at the moment. But if you look at the climate, crisis or whatever you want to call it, we got at the moment, it's fundamentally a hardware problem.
I agree.
Like software doesn't create emissions, but the hardware for software does, and like the hardware of cars create emissions.
And actually software doesn't produce anything.
No.
It's just information.
Exactly. It's just information.
People
it's
forget that, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. They're actually, there's two different worlds. And if you want to solve a hardware problem, you need a hardware solution. That's there's all these things of software that enables that. But ultimately, that's what you need. And that's what's, it's cool to make.
Well, before we get really stuck into the nitty gritty about what you do, your business, solar canopies, the state of the world in regards to renewables, hobbies. I've got to ask hobbies. Do you have time for hobbies? And if so, what do you do?
I think definitely. And look, I reckon there used to be this, from what I've observed at least, that, you work in a startup and you work super hard and that's all you do and like that's cool. But I just think, there's nothing further from the truth. Like obviously you work hard, but you need an outlet to go enjoy yourself and, like obviously the energy transition's important, but your own life and well-being and friends, that's always got to be important. And sometimes I've looked at this you kind of like, what am I actually prioritizing? You kind of think about it and you're like, why am I doing work first or not hanging out with my friends? Or why am I doing this? Like you gotta constantly think about it because it is so easy to stay busy and all of a sudden, it's the end of the year and you're going, oh, what am I doing for Christmas? I haven't even thought about it, because I've been so busy. But yeah, me personally, I really like surfing. That's my kind of thing I love doing with my mates.
Is Mittagong fairly close to the coast?
Not really. Like Mittagong's super far away.
That's
it's like an hour and a bit away. It was more when I moved to Sydney, and like I don't normally organise stuff with my mates. I'm not that kind of guy, but I've gotten more into organising things, and we actually organised a whole boat in the Mentawais, which is basically some islands off the coast of Indonesia.
Wow.
And we're surfing there for 12 days in July.
Wow, big waves there,
Well, we'll see. Like,
wow.
we're definitely not that good. There's a few guys that actually probably could surf the big stuff. We'll see where the boat goes because we've got the whole boat, so we can kind of decide where we go. But yeah, it's meant to be amazing surf.
Wow.
And that will be super fun. And like, I find it really nice, especially to go overseas because you get super involved in your own business and you think about business all the time. Go to a different time zone, go to a different area, and it's so nice to switch off and not think about work. Whereas even when I'm in Australia, always I'm like, you can get the phone call and you're looking at car parks and you just need that different environment to really switch off. And surfing for me is like the furthest thing from a car park you can imagine. So it's good. Black and white.
One day they'll be covering the ocean.
Yeah, hopefully not. That's one place they can not put solar panels. I'd be pretty happy with it.
Surfing's one of those things where you really are, you have to be in the moment totally. You have to be totally present. Exactly. Or else you can't be surfing, can you?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a really cool link to the environment that I think's rare. Like, there's so many different factors that impact the surf. It's the wind, it's the swell direction, it's all these kind of things, and it's a really cool, experience to be. Like, I think it's one of the closest places you can get to nature because you're fully in its kind of wrath, and you're trying to read what's coming and, that first wave's always a bit smaller here and it sucks up a bit here. And it's really cool to have that, I guess, relationship with the environment. And I think it's hard to replicate in other things. Like you go for a good hike and, I love a good hike, but you're just walking on a mountain and you're looking at the views. It's not that same kind of yin yang that you get with surfing. And I think that's what makes it so cool.
I read an article recently. It was a pro surfer and he said, being in a tube. Now, I've never surfed, right? I've boogie boarded and stuff and tried to body surf.
Dick dragger.
Exactly.
That's what you are.
And he said when he was in the tube or when he's within a tube, it's like being kissed by God. And I thought, I've never been in one, but I can sort of understand what
I've
he's talking about.
also never been in one. Just put that on record. So hopefully that happens in one day. But yeah, I've heard it's amazing, right? Like that's like probably the ultimate aim. It's pretty hard to do. I'm a barrel dodger. That's my title. But yeah, it's super cool and super fun. And the cool thing is you can be a terrible surfer and it's still really fun. Like you can still float out there with your friends. It's not like a run where they'll just run off. It's like we're all in the same spot. Right. I just won't catch any waves and I'll watch you guys catch waves. And I still get to experience that kind of, that thrill of seeing you on a sick wave.
And I tell you what, also it would probably appeal to engineers on another level because there's a lot of physics involved with a wave, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. It's black magic. It's like, how does this thing happen? It's just there's so many different forms of the wave and conditions. It's almost like chicken. Do you ever think about chicken and think chicken is like the most versatile food? Like there's so many different ways you can cook chicken. You have barbecue chicken and like this kind of chicken, and it's just such a versatile thing. I know that's a random reference, but like the water's like that as well. Like it has so many different forms and critical properties about it. Even we were just talking about going skiing before, and like that's water. Like it's impressive. I guess one of the impressive old school elements, which I really think is cool. 64
known isotopes of water. They really don't know bugger all. Water's, we could have a whole podcast talking about water. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Sure. Let's start talking about solar canopies.
My favourite topic.
All right, start. Go for it.
Yeah, so, like solar canopies, and I think I mentioned this before, I remember meeting with someone early days and he had some really good advice. And he said, it's much better owning 90% of a niche than 1% of a main category. And that's what he kind of pitched to me about like why he liked what I was doing. And I completely agree. Like where, solar canopies are such a niche. If you look at the whole, solar market, 75% roughly is, rooftop systems and the other 25% is utility, and there's like a 0.1% which is solar canopies. Like it's such a small part of the market.
It is small now though, but
it's small now, yeah. And there's not many providers. There's probably 3 or 4 different competitors we've got, all that have in-situ systems. Can
you explain what you mean by in-situ systems as opposed to what you do?
Yeah, sure. So in-situ systems basically just means it's built on site. Is probably the best way of explaining it. So, in situ concrete, you pour it on site instead of a prefabricated or precast concrete, which you pour in a factory and then bring it fully formed. And in situ is how most construction's done. You don't really need to call it in situ. It's just the way it's done. And the thing about in situ is it obviously involves a lot of labour on site to get it done. And when I was at Solgen, I experienced firsthand some of the complications around in situ because you're doing remote sites. Like we did one in Ellenbrook in WA.
Wow.
And you're installing 1,100 kilowatts worth of solar, which is like 400 parking spaces. And once you've done the foundations and the structural steel, right, which is probably like 20% of the work or 30% of the work, the remaining 70% is done 3 meters in the air from a scissor lift.
Wow, which is slow, laborious work.
So slow and laborious, and like I don't know if you guys have been in scissor lift, but you beeping forward at like half a meter a second when it's high, and it is so time consuming to do and so inefficient. And that's really why I think prefabrication has so much to offer. Like even though it's been applied to other industries, I think there's such a big delta. There's such a low hanging fruit with God. The way we do it at the moment is so inefficient. Like. It's not like, we can do it, 5B is a great company, but they've got to be so fast at doing it for their system because ground mount's already really quick to install.
Yes.
Everything's at ground level.
Correct.
The access is really good and they can put in these, huge solar farms really quickly. So, you need to be that much quicker than what already exists to have a compelling value proposition. The cool thing about solar canopies is it's done so slowly at the moment. The typical installation, like we just came off a project, which I won't mention, in Sydney, and they're the only client that's both had an in-situ system installed.
Wow.
And our prefabricated system.
Apples with apples comparison.
Yeah, so they're the only client in Australia that's done that. And it's crazy. You look at that first system and, the first system took 5 months to install. right? A bigger system, like 600 kilowatts on a multi-level car park, took about 5 months to install. Our system took 5 weeks.
So let's just jump back 5 months, and what that translates to is 5 months of interruption for people trying to park in certain areas, and all the things that connects to. Compared to how long?
5 weeks.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, it's and like that was in the.
I'll repeat. That's a big same size system.
It's smaller, but like, you know, probably 60% of the size, like, you know, very similar kind of in terms of the footprint it took up. It just didn't cover the aisles like that one did. Like, I'll give you something that this will hopefully blow your mind. So we did
It's already blown. Please continue.
Hold on. So we did a project up in Brisbane last year, our first Queensland project, a place called Warner for Woolworths. And this is the thing, like, it's obviously cost is important, right? The big difference with the solar canopy is disruption to a store's operations is completely critical.
Massive.
It is such a big thing. And this project was super difficult because it's a multi-tenancy site. So we're installing a big solar canopy for Woolies, but there's an Audi and all the specialty stores and, you know, a really busy, tight access car park. So we kind of won the project and we're going through it and we're going, this car park is a nightmare to get into. And we're quick, but like even just the access that you needed and everything.
Weakest link in the chain,
Yeah. And we kind of, you know, the client was going, oh, can you do it in 2 stages? And we're like, oh, this is going to be so costly. We've got to demobilize, come back. And we're kind of going through it and we're like, look, why don't we just try and do the whole thing in one night, right? So we kind of looked at it and it's the same thing. It's you're kind of in the trenches, right, with your engineers and you're going, well, like, what are we going to do here? Like, you know, the client's pushing us to do a 2-stage program. You know, it sounds like they're not going to give a variation for that. It's going to, you know, all these things. We've got another project that we're going to delay. Like all this stuff was coming up. And it was kind of like this really good solution that came up and we got buy-in from everyone to do it. So what we did was we said, okay, we'll install 250 kilowatts, right, in 3 weeks. We'll do the whole thing in 3 weeks. And, you know, your foundations you got to do. So you're going to, you know, put the concrete in, wait for that to set, do the structural steel. And then we'll bring in 2, not just 1, but 2 mobile cranes, right? And we'll install 250 kilowatts worth of pods of solar panels overnight.
Wow.
So we rolled in, we all flew up as a team. We had everyone up there, all hands on deck. And yeah, the kind of, you know, by 8 p.m, we kind of started taking over the car park and putting all the temporary fencing up and getting the lights out. And we literally installed 250 kilowatts overnight. By 6 a.m, after the whole night was done, we landed the last pod and then the 2 cranes left. And that's what is like super fun and super validating. And, you know, the people would have, you know, finished their Woolies, you know, gone for their shop and come in the next morning and there's a whole solar canopy there when they rock up the next day. It's really cool.
So Will, you're talking about, 250 kilowatt of solar basically in a 24-hour period are we talking about? Yeah,
that's right. Like the obviously the structural steel and the foundations were done before then and there's some minor works you do after, but the heavy lifting or the roof effectively, if you think about it that way, we did overnight. And like if we did that project again now, I reckon we could do it in 2 weeks. Like, and that's where we need to be.
The whole project.
The whole project. That differential of like how quickly can you install, and it snowballs. This is what's really cool about it. So, if I'm faster on site, I've just reduced my labour cost, right? And that's the biggest component we're attacking.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
And the client's also really happy because I've minimised the disruption to their car park,
which has huge ramifications.
Massive, and like even some conservative numbers. You know, each car space out for a week conservatively is $1,000 a week. You know, just think about the cost of that business, because think about people going in.
Absolutely.
And it's just such a big thing. Obviously, that's assuming they can't park somewhere else, or like, you know, or they just go to the next supermarket because they're pissed off. And
that's what they'll do.
And then people, creatures of habit, they go, oh, this supermarket's pretty good. I'll just go shop here now. Why would I go back to, you know, this one that's got all the construction works on? So minimizing the disruption is absolutely critical. And, you know, a massive enabler is we'll just do it at night. That's what we do for supermarkets now. We go, cool, we'll just rock up with our big, you know, day makers, they call them, the big lights that you use in the, you see them on the roads and stuff when they're doing night works. And, you know, you take up the whole car park, you got heaps of space. and you just, bring a big 60-ton mobile crane in, and 5 semi-trailers of solar panels can get installed overnight.
So with the prefabricated, so we are talking about all the structural steel comes to site ready to be clicked together like a Meccano set.
Yeah, it's kind of.
I'm trying to get an image in my head.
Let me paint a picture. So,
please.
The structural steel, which we term is like the columns and the rafters, so the thing that's at the ground, that's not really prefabricated. I mean, that's just a bit of RHS really that gets built on site. And to be honest, it's not that, whether you do it in situ or with our system, it's the same kind of install time.
Right.
The big thing is everything that sits above the structural steel. So the roof, so the purlins, the panels, the wiring, all that stuff is effectively where the hard work is and the time.
Now, so... And if people are not watching, they're going to have to imagine me moving my hand. So we're talking about the actual columns being put on site, and then everything that goes on top.
Yes,
that's the prefabrication.
Exactly right. So the columns we can erect in a day. So the columns aren't a big issue at all. Like we just did a project down at West Illawarra Leagues Club, and the columns I think were done site establishment first day, columns on Tuesday, and we installed 30 pods or 120 kilowatts worth of solar yesterday. So it's that's the time suck is all these, and if you look at I'll paint a picture again because I know it's a podcast. Like you've got hundreds of purlins, and each module has 4 mounting points, and then 2 MC4 connectors,
yes.
and there's so many componentry, and 250 kilowatts in terms of panels is around 400 solar panels. Right, that's a lot of panels, and they weigh 40 kilos each that you need to put in, and then you got to tighten all 4
What do you mean 40 kilo?
They weigh 40 kilos. So each solar panel weighs 40 kilos, the ones we use.
Oh, how come?
They're bifacial.
Oh.
And they're massive. So the panels we use are like 780 watts.
Oh.
So they're...
Of course.
Yeah.
The bigger the panel, from a prefabrication perspective, of course you go for the biggest ones you can bloody well get.
Exactly.
Because no human being wants to handle a 700 kilo. You know what I mean? Individually, that's huge.
They're massive, yeah. So we, the whole thing is, minimizing. I mean, if you guys explain it to a 3-year-old about how you basically strip out cost, make all the units bigger. How big can your Lego block be? Because that's, the same unit, the same pod takes the same amount of time to install really. It doesn't matter if it's 7 meters long or 15. It's just a thing that you lift up when you put in there.
Yes, but you're also restricted by the transportation.
Yes.
And I mean, are you talking danger wide load?
We kind of push it. So we're so with wide load, so you can go 2.5 meters wide. Our thing's about 3, but the good thing is there's not a huge cost as long as you're below 3.5. So you still need like the warning lights and stuff, but you don't need an escort.
Right.
So the cost for transport's pretty similar, but your energy density is really high.
Yeah.
What you're transporting. And that's always the I guess disadvantage of prefabrication. Your transport costs are always higher because you've got more trucks, because it's less dense what you're actually transporting.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's good to do it that way. And to be honest, it also makes it defendable, because it's very difficult for example, a Chinese company to copy us and go, well, we'll do prefabricated. It's like, now you got to build it in China, have the lead time, somehow ship it all the way to Australia.
That's fantastic, because I was thinking it's going to be copied, but that is really good. You've got something that they could copy, but still those costs, they have to go through those costs. It's not viable for them to do. Yeah. This is really good.
Yeah. You
really thought about it.
So it gives you a good moat. And even if you look at like for each pod for us to give you, so if you divide the total contract value over the number of pods, which is what, basically our prefabricated element that we land, the bit of roof with all the solar panels installed, each pod is worth about 20 grand in terms of, so if you go the average project's 850 grand, for example, 36 pods roughly, it's about 20 grand of revenue that each pod is worth. Obviously there's all this other stuff that needs to get done. But it's really cool when you think about it that way, because it's like, well, our limiting factor really of expansion is how many pods can we make a day and how much does the pod cost? Right. And with us, like if you look at a pod, it takes about 5 man hours to make a pod from start to finish on our production line. And you're thinking about an average price of say 30, like so let's call it $40 an hour, right? Is what it costs for our labor with our overheads to do. You're talking about $200 worth of cost in basically assembling this thing to 80% done.
Wow.
And then, but that thing is worth 20 grand in revenue.
Gee.
So there's this really good differential, and our manufacturing line is like 5% of the turnkey cost. Like it's such a small percentage, but it's such an important factor in the whole system.
Can I ask about the
Sure.
foundation side of things?
Sure.
So obviously pouring foundations, no matter if you use a quick set concrete, I don't know what MPA you're using, what have you, but there's a time component there.
Yes.
And there's a cost component.
Oh, 100%.
Now, I don't know if you know where I'm leading, but
Yeah.
there's products out there that effectively don't require concrete foundations. And a friend of mine, actually, he produces one of these products, and there's a couple other similar ones on the market, and he's put up wind turbines.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is a superfoot foundation.
Oh, yeah.
So effectively, it is imagine a steel bracket that sits on the ground in situ.
Yeah.
And then 40 mil galvanized pipes are driven in on different angles, like an octopus, and structured under, and they are certified the whole bit.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've looked at?
That's really funny you bring that up. Our first installation used that kind of foundation system.
Right.
We used a company called Surefoot.
Yeah. That's right. They're the same, effectively.
Very similar things.
Surefoot, yeah.
For our use case, it doesn't really work as well. What we found is you don't need big machinery, which is a benefit. That's like the benefit of at least the ones that we use with Surefoot. You can just kind of pile drive it in with a big jackhammer.
Correct.
But what we found was if you have any sort of tough ground, rocks, anything like that.
You hit a floater.
It makes it really difficult. And there's a lot of interaction between, well, how do you actually get the foundations exactly right? Because it's prefabricated and it's all measured off effectively a site survey.
Within the
it needs
nth
to
degree,
be millimetre
perfect.
accurate, because I can't change my roof.
Right.
It's already built in the factory.
Right.
So the great thing about concrete is you've got a lot of flexibility, obviously, before you pour the concrete and while it's wet, to make your survey pins and all your rag bolts spot on. But it's interesting to talk about foundations because we've actually got a slightly different solution to everyone else anyway. So most of the solutions are a board concrete pier, basically a big hole, big cylinder with a spiral Rio cage, and that's what you do. And it's a good solution, but for retrofits, which is pretty much all the car parks we do, there's a lot of spoil generation. So there's a lot of, if you dig a hole, usually the expansion factor is if you take out a metre cubed, right, you've got 2.2 metres cubed of spoil because it expands, it's got air in it.
Right.
And putting spoil or taking that to the dump is extremely expensive, especially if it's contaminated or, there's all these kind of issues with spoil that you try and minimise. Like we did a project recently, we spent like 20 grand on just removing spoil. It's a big cost. So what we use is screw piers.
I was going to say, and those screw...
Oh, they're great.
Yeah.
They're great.
But wouldn't that be the same issue when you hit a floater?
Yes, it is. So you can't obviously have rocks there, but they can take like small rocks and things like that. So, basically our rule is that if we do a project, as long as there's not low-lying rock, and low-lying, I mean within 4 metres, we use screw piers.
Yeah, but the geotech doesn't go down 4 metres though.
It goes down 6.
Oh.
Yeah. So we do a geotech that goes down 6 so we can check it. We've thought about that.
I was thinking from a solar farm perspective, we've never gone down that deep in our geotech. But that's interesting, right?
Yeah, so you can go really deep.
Plenty.
Yeah, it's great. And you can do all the screw piers in a day for most projects.
Wow.
Like it's really quick. And there's, almost no spoil generation. So that you dig like they call it a strip footing. So it's basically just like a little rectangle in the ground with a Rio cage, and that's where the rag bolts interact. But the screw piers, really quick. The other great thing, it's almost a tagline for screw piers, you can go deeper, cheaper. So if
you're the master of
but if you do a board concrete pier, and quite often with car parks, they're terrible, like uncompacted fill. Like people put a car park down, it's just shitty land usually. And to get to the virgin grounds, normally like a metre or two, or quite often is, and basically it has no structural integrity. So that first bit I got a discount. And the cost build up of a board concrete pier is, well, how long is your board concrete pier? Because your concrete and your Rio and the time to install are all just linearly scale with the depth of it. With screw pier, like we did that project I was talking about in Queensland had really bad ground conditions, very little bearing capacity. Like we need 200 kPa bearing capacity. It was like 50. So we went 9 meters deep with our screw piers, and you just put on a few extensions, and like, you know, there's obviously cost more, but it's a very small variation compared to if I went twice as deep with board concrete pier, it cost me twice as much.
Oh, I can imagine.
So there's a big saving there, and think about the spoil you generate.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And that's an additional cost.
Yeah.
And plus, from an environmental perspective, God knows what's in that spoil. I mean, if you're talking about an old ex-industrial site, there's a lot of battery in Richmond, lead. There's a lead poison in the soil because all the battery factories that used to be around like 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, even longer. This, you know, God forbid having a little veggie garden in your backyard if you live in Richmond. So there's that to contend with. The screw pile, so the screw piles, is that, so that's definitely your preferred method?
Oh, 100%. I mean, ask the guys on site that they've done both, and they're like, oh, can we just do screw piers on every site? And it's like, well, yeah, we can, as long as it's not floaters or low-lying rock. It's definitely the preferred option.
Wow.
It's so clean. And that, funnily enough, guess what? My old man has a screw pier business. So like I said, you can see it all circles back into like some crazy empire of construction and manufacturing.
It must be really good from a trust perspective because, you know, business is about relationships and there's a lot of trust.
I could not agree more. That's probably my biggest learning. It's really funny you say that, but it's about building relationships and trust, and it's so important. And you know, no one cares about how good your product is or any of those things if it's someone you can't trust and build a strong relationship with. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
that's such an
I'm glad you said that.
important part of things. And when people ask me what's my biggest learning, that how important relationships are in business. Businesses are people. They're not just a name. They're not an organisation.
I'm glad you said that.
It's so important. You look at the really great brands, you know, usually they've got a really great founder or they've got these really good relationships that they've built within that organisation with their clients and all the other stakeholders.
Let's face it, people want to do business with other people who they sort of get on with. Of course, there's a financial thing, but if you're doing business with people that are actually half decent, are morally sound, ideologically sound, are good at what they do, why the hell would you do business with anyone else?
Exactly.
Unless they're twice as expensive. I'll say one extra thing too. It is trust, but there's one other thing that once you've got your trust, then you get respect.
Yeah.
And that if you've got respect, then you really respect and trust, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always talking about relationships in business because to me it's a friggin' no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, all tempered by the reality that we have finite time on this earth and time is our most valuable resource.
Exactly.
Getting a bit philosophical.
Yeah. And spend it with people you like hanging out with. I mean, you spend so much time working. Let's make it enjoyable, you know. I don't want to work with people I don't enjoy hanging out with or who I'm not prepared to have a beer with after work. That's not a great spend of time.
That's a great bit of advice. So now these panels, I got to ask, why the bifacials? What is so because
I've got some strong views on why. We only do bifasials. I mean, bifasials are like maybe, I don't know, a cent more per watt. Like the cost increase for a bifacial is almost nothing.
Right.
You get the additional power gain.
Yes.
So they're nice and high, like the minimum height's 2.9 meters. So you get reflected sunlight from the albedo of the ground. Obviously, if it's concrete, it's really high. Asphalt's a bit lower. So, you know, we're seeing around 3 to 5% increase in generation just from a bifacial panel.
But the albedo from the ground is irrelevant because it should be the albedo from the cars.
Oh, it depends, I guess, obviously, how I guess, well frequented your car park is. Right. But yeah, you're right. It's the cars and the ground and all sorts of different things that give you that generation gain. And they also just look amazing.
They do.
If you look at monofacial panels, like most people don't know they're under a solar canopy if it's monofacial, you know, with the white plastic back sheets and
it looks pretty. Yeah, it does look good.
It's so early 2000s, you know. How do we make it into the future? And it's really cool. Like one thing that's really nice, I remember finishing a project again for Woolies down in Yass, and we're there when we open up the car park. Like it's really cool because it's all construction and then you finally, you know, people can park in, you see the first customer park in. And it was really cool because like a family got out and they, picked up their kids from school, and like the kids
just look it up,
were just looking up and going, "Oh wow, mum, like look, that's solar panels and that's so cool." And like it was a really like genuine experience to see that they can see that. And they appreciate it, and it's cool, and it does look sick. Like I reckon they look really cool, and it doesn't. I was joking yesterday about solar canopies. I was like, who doesn't like solar canopies? Like I don't, even the biggest redneck with his, big ute or whatever. Like, do you like undercover parking?
Yeah.
Do you want
That's
your
a loaded
ute?
question. Everyone does.
Yeah. Do you want your ute to get hot? Like, do you want like who is disadvantaged by it? It's like I don't know.
No one.
I haven't really met that person yet. Maybe the person that sells shade cloth, which we'll get into in a second. And I'll have it on record. I'm coming for you. I will kill you. I'll rip your head off. Like we are honestly so keen to get into the to displace shade cloth. I mean, it served its purpose. It provides shade, and that's great. But every time I see a new shade cloth installation, I just think, what a missed opportunity. I wish I spoke to those person, like that kind of company first, and kind of showed them the value proposition and showed them that, at this point, if you want shade, which most retail car parks do because it increases their store turnover, and you want solar and on-site renewable energy generation, it's now at the turning point where I can give you a solar canopy for the same cost as those two separate things.
Oh.
And my system's better because it's waterproof and it lasts longer. So that's the turning point, and that's what we spend a lot of time educating people on. They go, oh, solar canopy is expensive and blah, 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 but what does shade cloth cost you? Shade cloth is about $4,500 per car space installed. Right?
Oh wow,
it's a lot of money. Yeah.
Really, that much?
Yeah. That's how much it costs.
Sure.
And it's hideous. Like I just don't think shade cloth looks good. Like it provides a function, and that's great, and it's not waterproof. And then if you look at rooftop solar, so our standard system, you can fit around 3 kilowatts of solar per car space.
Right.
That's how it works out. And solar's about $1.20 per watt for rooftop solar. If you look at what that solar cost is, it's it's another kind of $3,000 roughly, or $3,500 for the what you'd fit on a car space. Right. So you're going, well, $4,500, $3,500. So we're basically about $8,000 per car space covered, and our systems are like really close to that. So depending on the site, we're between like $8,500 and $9,000. So for a small premium at the moment, you can have a solar canopy that is fully waterproof.
And produces energy.
And the cool thing is, the biggest issue I've seen with shade cloth, and we talk to supermarket and landlords all the time, is shade cloth has a design life of 10 years.
Yes,
and then you go and replace it.
It's going to be 5 years with the way the UV's going.
And the storms and all those kind of things. So when you look at the CapEx, it's almost like an electric vehicle to an extent. You go, well, most of the time an EV is slightly more expensive, but that distance is rapidly reducing, and in the very near future that it will be lower cost or the same cost, but the maintenance cost and the ongoing operation costs are way lower. So the total cost of ownership for most EVs is now better than an ICE car. Solar canopies are the same. Like when you factor in that really high, got to replace the whole shade cloth and refurbish it at the 10-year mark, or if it gets damaged in a storm, the cost is lower on a total cost of ownership basis than most sites when you look at a solar canopy compared to shade cloth plus rooftop.
And let's face it, if we looked at a shopping centre, same shopping centre covered with shade cloth, as opposed to the same shopping centre covered with solar canopy, the ambient temperature on that site would be less, because the thermal mass of that concrete underneath would be being heated up less.
Yeah.
Because let's face, even with shade cloth, a certain amount of light's getting through.
Yeah.
And that also translates to breakdown of the Duco on your car compared to a solar canopy. So there's all these other little advantages as well as the major ones.
Yeah. And the cool thing is it's also really visible. And I know that's more of a soft benefit, but if you look at Woolies, like
nothing wrong with having beauty and architecture.
Exactly. Yeah. But most commercial solar you can't see. Right? Like, did you know how many sites Woolies have done with rooftop solar?
No.
350 sites.
Right,
you know, like out of 1,100.
And we know we've been involved with Aldi's, and you can't see them.
You can't see it, but it's a really impressive number. But no one knows about it because you can't see it.
Yeah.
And the great thing about solar canopies is you can't miss it. Like it's the first thing you park underneath. It, you know, the bifacial panels that basically look the same on both sides. It's in your face. It looks good, and it enhances that customer experience. And that's where it really comes down to. Like everyone, I think I mentioned this before. Solar's all about saving money, right? And that's great. Solar canopies are all about improving the customer experience. Sure, you save money, and yes, there's all those benefits, but the headline act, the thing that people, you know, the sexy thing and the people that, you know, the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning is you're making that, you know, you're enhancing the built environment and you're enhancing the customer experience. And what you see, and this is, you know, kind of the numbers I've got from the supermarkets and a lot of the retail sites, if I put in undercover parking, whether that be solar canopies or shade cloth, that is attributed to a 2% increase in revenue for that store.
Wow.
So if you think about the average Woolies or Coles
that's
site,
huge.
they do $50 million turnover. 2% increase in revenue is a $1 million increase in store spend, which is massive.
That is huge. And there's another thing too that you'll probably touch on, but I'll jump in here now.
Yeah.
Projects scope 1, 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Environmental, carbon accounting, the requirements for suppliers, for businesses to actually have a lower footprint.
Yeah.
So there's this whole area where the parent company may say, "Hey, you need to do this." Right, from an environmental carbon accounting perspective.
Yeah.
And that is becoming more and more important. The councils are doing it in Australia as we speak.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies are now going, hang on, to their suppliers. What are you doing here? Oh, what's going on here? How are you accounting for your fuel costs? What are you doing on site? What are you doing from a renewable energy perspective? That's a big one.
It's massive. And look, you know, Woolies again, like they're fully green electricity from last year. You know, they're already paying more to buy green certified electricity, which means the ROI on the solar canopy is better because they're already paying this premium for the green electricity. There's a funny theme. The Climate Action Week's about to start. You know, next month. And one of the themes, which I thought was really cool, is like the green premium is dead. As in, like, most companies do not want to pay a premium for being sustainable, right? They need it to stack up commercially, right? And yes, if it's green and yes, blah, 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 that's important, but it's a commercial decision.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And that's, you know, where I think solar canopies are getting to. It used to be a bit of a niche, a bit more of an expensive thing. And you look at where the early ones were installed, they're all universities and councils and places that are definitely less commercially, I guess, sensitive about the payback for it. And where we're installing them now is supermarkets, RSLs, all these places that do it because, yes, it's sustainable and they've got reporting standards and things like that they need to hit. But it also just makes commercial sense. They make money out of it, you know, and that's how you drive real uptake and real scale.
Absolutely, there's the incentive.
People want it. They don't get hidden by a stick. It's the carrot, and they're going, this is making us more money. It's enhancing the customer experience, and that's where I want to get to, you know. And you know, a really big education piece is it now makes sense. You know, it's not a nice to have. It's if you like making more money
at your store. It's now.
Yeah. You're gonna get left behind. Really.
Well, that's look. I mean, it does make perfect sense. Look, I want to jump back a little bit because I want to ask this question.
Sure.
And I think I know the answer, but let's see because you would have fleshed it out.
Sure.
So you're using these bifacials. They're 40 kilos each. They're big ass. So they're huge panels.
They're massive.
And if you went for the same size panel in a non-bifacial configuration, obviously the overall weight of those pods of the 250 kilowatts of panel in one go, they're going to be a lot lighter, and that will translate to, from a structural perspective, less steel, etc. But it's not it sounds like it's not a huge. I'm assuming it's not a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean the main. So AS 1170 is the WIN code. This is me getting very technical.
No,
and boring.
please.
But the biggest force typically in our structures is uplift. Right? So if you look at the maximum design load you're considering, it's a huge wind load that creates an uplift.
It's not lateral.
The wind's not coming vertically down. It's not like rain.
Yeah.
It comes from the side or from the underneath, and that creates a massive uplift. So the weight of the panels in some respects actually helps
Is an advantage.
the structure. I mean, you still got to work with the deflection. You still need to design for that. So they call that serviceability. So it's not, the system's not going to fail, but you don't want to see a big, you don't want to see the thing bowing between all the columns. It still needs to meet that kind of design requirement. But yeah, the weight's not a problem. And the great thing about bifacials, which I love as well, is they're fully encapsulated in glass, which means the degradation's really low.
Right.
So we said, shade cloth, public enemy number one is about 10 years before you need to refurbish it. A bifacial solar panel, right, has a warranted performance of after 30 years, right, 84% of its original nameplate capacity. And that's what it's warranted for.
That's fantastic.
So, which is ridiculous. Like, yeah, that's just such a long time, and it's in an extreme environment, and it's glass, like an aluminium. Like, what's to deteriorate? Like,
totally.
It's a very stable thing. Whereas shade cloth is HDPE plastic that's got UV treated in it.
We talked about this off camera. The additional microplastics, people breathing in, what have you.
Yeah.
The fact that it breaks down.
Yeah.
It's not a long-term solution, and it looks pretty horrible even when really well installed. It doesn't hold a candle to a lovely solar panel.
No. It's like, it makes sense the way that they got installed, and you can see it's kind of cool because you go, well, people care so much about the customer experience and about providing shade that they'll spend all this costs and money and maintenance and everything to put in shade cloth. So it's very validating for the use case of a solar canopy. Because you can say, well, there's already a proven market here. There's already a proven demand. It's how do we make the economics stack up so that when we look at, like I said, the cost of the rooftop solar, which is what we're kind of doing instead, and the cost of what shade costs through shade, these shade cloth systems, we can have a compelling offering with a solar canopy. And that's, the turning point we're reaching. And it's super exciting. Like, like I said, I think we've hit that point. It's probably more market education now, and to get it to the thing where it's just the default option. People go, we want some shade, and they just put it in. And one more thing I'll talk about, and we talked about this off camera as well, is what's the other stuff you can also do, right? And we talk about creating these renewable energy hubs. And the cool thing about going back to why people don't mind solar canopies is, like, you're installing it in a place that is effectively ecologically dead. It's an asphalt car park. Like, you're not going to get anyone stopping works to say, oh no, let's protect the asphalt.
A rare orchid springing up.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't
there's
happen.
a weed. There's a weed in the middle here that's endangered. It's ecologically dead, and you're improving that space. But yeah, so the cool thing about solar canopies is you can bolt on other things to it, and you can make not just solar, not just shade, but what's the other things we can do here? We've already got this really good backbone infrastructure. What about EV charging? And I did some analysis over the weekend because I was speaking at an EV charging conference, and I was kind of going, well, what is the additional cost of installing two 22 kilowatt chargers, for example? If I did it as a standalone system, how much would it cost me, right? If I had to, trench through the car park and put them in a car park, and how much would it cost me if I just did it utilizing the same backbone infrastructure as a solar canopy that already has all the trenching and cable runs and stuff done as part of the base build? And basically what I got to was, if you did a standalone 2 EV chargers, right? And these chargers don't cost anything. The hardware's like $2,000. Like, they don't cost much at all. It's really the cable run, the trenching, the switchboard upgrades, the contractors on site. It cost about $84,000.
Wow.
Right, which is a fair bit of money for something that should cost so little, because the infrastructure cost is so high. And this is for a site we were looking at up in Queensland. If I did that as part of a solar canopy, right, the additional cost is about $15,000, because I've already got the trenching. I can just put more conduit in the ground for the EV cables. I've already got the cable tray routes. I've already got the switchboard. I've already got the installers on site. So you get this really good integration where, the additional cost is almost nothing.
So is this currently now, you'd obviously offer this as an option, wouldn't you? Or do you? I
mean, pretty much every site we do, it's not the selling point. Like, it stacks up by itself in terms of just solar and shade. but it's a really cost-effective integration that makes, and it snowballs. Like, not only can you make money out of the EV charging, it also enhances the customer experience. So if I'm an EV owner, right, and that's only going to, more and more percentage of the population will be EV owners in the future, where are you going to go shop, right? You're going to shop where you have undercover parking, where you can easily charge your EV if you need to charge it. And how much money will that person spend in store? Well, probably they're waiting for the EV to charge, which might be 40 or 50 minutes, and they'll do their big shop, and that will make their routine. And in the future, people will expect to go to the supermarkets, fill up their shopping trolley, and fill up their car.
Yeah.
That's the future that exists.
And that'll be happening sooner than we think, I think.
It's already happening, to be honest. Like, EV chargers are starting to get rolled out at these supermarkets. You look at overseas at Sainsbury's, for example.
This is in England, isn't it?
Yeah, in England. They're one of the top 10 charge point providers in the UK. And they just realised, well, what's the number one determinant of where people charge? Convenience, right? Can we just make it part of your weekly thing that you go and charge while your car's already there? Like, it's super simple. I remember listening to a guy talk about EV charging. I thought it was pretty funny. He said, people always ask me how long it takes to charge my car. And he's like, I don't know. I go home, I plug it in, it takes me 2 seconds, and then I wake up the next morning and I unplug it. So it takes me about 10 seconds to charge my car. Like that. It's like, who cares how long it's there? Like, it's already parked there. It's like, what is the time to actually interact with it that you're actually spending with EV charging? It becomes a 20-second charge. I plug it in, I go do the things that I normally do, and I come out and I unplug it. It didn't take me any time at all. It took me an extra 20 seconds to do out of my day.
Here's an interesting idea, because you go to a lot of shopping centres and there's people who have a section of the car park undercover under let's say a solar canopy, and they're washing cars and they're detailing them. And wouldn't it be a great idea if they also offered, there's an EV charger that they rent from the shopping centre, the customer can come there, get their car washed and cleaned and what have you, at the same time give it a bit of a quick charge as well.
100%. I mean, I think stuff like that is definitely needed. And like, it's always the thing of, well, what does it cost to put in standalone? And it's huge. Like, who wants to spend 84 grand to put in some pretty slow level 2 chargers? Yeah. It's not that sexy, right? No. And most supermarkets, like, level 2 chargers are too slow. They don't want people there for 5 hours. They want DC chargers. They can give you a good charge while you're there, and kind of matches the dwell time.
Yes.
Of 40 minutes, which is pretty typical for most kind of supermarkets.
Is it right?
Yeah, it's about that. Okay. Obviously, it changed a little bit. For some Metro, maybe that's a bit shorter.
You've done lots of research.
I've been deep in the problem area, but that's where it becomes really cool. The other thing that's happening as well, and I was mentioning this yesterday, is just what's happening in the industry in general with some of the other technology. So like batteries, for example, the prices, I think, halved in the last 18 months. Like, it's crazy. So people used to always ask, what about batteries? And I was like, look, I wouldn't do it. Like, pretty much all the systems, all the energy goes to the building. They don't export. So why would you put a battery in? It's just going to charge off the grid anyway. But now with the battery price where it is, and the trajectory is it will get lower again, you can now start to integrate batteries, not only to help the EV chargers, so you're not augmenting the grid. So if you start putting more and more chargers in, you're increasing your load, and at some point, you need to basically supplement that additional load through batteries or grid upgrades. So that's one part of it.
Yes.
And then the second part is you can now start to trade that energy.
Yes.
And be wholesale market exposed.
The old energy arbitrage, and we talked.
The old energy arbitrage.
It really makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That's the way it's going to go.
Yeah. And it also, the cool thing, which is a massive enabler as well, is typically when you do solar, you size it to like, it normally, especially for a supermarket, I mean, they're great because their load is 7 days a week, 7 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Pretty flat consumption rate.
Flat consumption, but, they don't get heaps of export on the weekends like an industrial facility because they're open all the time.
Yes.
But normally the profile means that you can normally install like 30 to 40% solar before you start exporting. Right, so that's your upper limit. And when you export, you make no money because the grid doesn't give you anything.
Yes.
Quite often commercial is zero.
And in some cases they will charge you.
They'll charge you, yes. You need to export limited. But the cool thing that's an enabler is when you put batteries in there, like, it's feasible you could cover 100% of your load.
Right.
You could do 150% of your load and make more money by doing energy arbitrage.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, the sizing is is, the sky's the limit. How much can you install on your site?
Yes.
And the economics get pushed out further and further in terms of, now at this really big size, it still gives me the return on investment that I want.
It's funny over the years how the economic conditions have tempered the actual design. When I started back in 2003, it was really unknown, Queen Vic market. And then later on, when there was an $8,000 rebate, we were saying, 66-cent feed-in tariff, turn your fridge off, put it on timer based on the thermal holding capacity of the fridge. Don't consume anything during the day.
Yeah.
And then it all changed.
Yeah.
And then people started going, okay, east-west configurations matching consumption rates. Now with batteries, they're going to go back to a full north-facing to maximise their output.
Generate as much as you can.
It's like our industry is all over the place, and that's why you have to be very agile.
Yeah.
Now, the panels, I got to ask, is there a particular brand you use, or are you allowed to mention the brand?
Of course, yeah. Like there's no paid partnerships here.
No.
Panels are super boring.
They are.
As in like, like
for all the panel manufacturers. Sorry, but they are.
But like,
they're not
you know what I mean? They all get made in the same factory in China, and they all, they've all got really similar efficiencies.
As long
and
as
they're
they're
all the
tier
same
one,
size. Yeah, they're all tier one. There's like 20 tier one. Like honestly, solar panels are so boring and non-interesting. It doesn't matter, but there is a panel manufacturer that I really like that actually has a different product. And what has been happening, there's always, every like 3 years, there's like a new technology that comes in, right? So there's like perk panels, and then there's TopCon, and, and they all give you those minor increases in efficiency. And back contact is the flavor of the month. And there's a company called ACO, which is relatively new. You probably like, I can see by looking at your face.
Well, Thomas has been on our show.
Has he?
Yeah, he's goddamn genius. I'll tell you what,
There you go. Well, that's funny. I didn't realise that. But yeah, Tom, their panel's different because it's really high efficiency. And I'm sure he explained it on your podcast, but effectively, instead of having the buzz bars on the front side, which effectively shade the cell, they put it on the back side, right? And the whole front of the panel, you can see it, is like black. Like it's pretty much just all silicon wafer, all absorbing energy, and there's some other benefits in terms of micro cracking and stuff. But the reason their panel's so cool is like it's a little bit more expensive per watt, but like very little. Like even 1 or 2 cents. Like it's bugger all. And if you look at the turnkey cost of a system, 7% of the cost is a solar panel.
Oh, that is sweet bugger all.
It's nothing. So if I can increase my efficiency of the panel by 5%.
Yeah, wow.
And it increases the cost of the overall system by say 0.5%, if that. Then my dollar per watt's better.
And it's aesthetically pleasing at the same time.
And it looks awesome. So we're kind of like, the most efficient panel. In fact, we could probably pay more for the panel, to be honest, because...
Don't tell him that.
Yeah. But, we could pay almost twice as much and it would still make sense.
Wow.
Because it's such a small component.
So that's
of
what
the
you're
overall
using?
cost.
You're using the...
ACO panels.
ACO.
Yep, love them. They're really good.
Thomas, I hope you're listening. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, they're good panels. But like, look, all the other panels are good as well. They're just lower efficiency.
And they obviously make so obviously I'll step back a bit. You need a very big panel, 700 watt plus, but you also need the physical dimension. Obviously, everything's tooled to do the physical dimensions of a particular panel, isn't it?
It's kind of like people ask us, can we choose the panel? And it's kind of like. It's kind of like the forward stuff, you can have it in any color as long as it's black. It's like you can use whatever panel you want, but it will increase the cost. And I kind of go back to what's so special about your panel. It's a Trina or a Jinko or whatever. It's like, what's the difference? Tell me fundamentally what the difference is. Nothing. It's just in your spec.
But if it was 70% of the cost, the panel, that'd be a different story.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's a really, really low percentage. So
who cares?
Who cares?
Exactly. Don't and like there's all these flow-on effects. It's like we've got our own patented module mounting systems. Then we're going to update that, and then that impacts the structural steel sizing. And then there's all these things. And the way we're trying to make money is like standardize it. Like we effectively have a car production line.
Yes.
And there's like 3 options. It's like, do you want EV chargers as part of it? Do you want it painted? And do you want lights? And they're your 3 options.
Yeah, gotcha.
And you want this light? Well, we don't do that light. We do this light. And like if you really want to do it, sure, we can do a customization. But most of the time when we go down the path, they just go, well, you've done 20 of these installations already. You've worked out what the best solution is. We're happy to take your advice on how to do it.
Now, can you Because I haven't ever flown over or seen drone footage of a solar canopy system.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the panels literally butting up? You're not going to standard roof mount, ground mount.
Yeah.
You've got a mid clamp, it's 25 mil prox, whatever, between the panel.
Yeah.
There's a gap, right?
Yeah, of course.
Now, and in the agrivoltaics jobs we've done, the gap is much greater, but that's been worked out because of sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. So are we talking about how are they? Yes. Explain how they're.
This is the secret sauce. So I mentioned, we got we patented our own module mounting system. And it was a really big, hard thing to solve because making solar canopies waterproof is really difficult. In fact, most of them aren't waterproof, which sucks because you spend $1 million on this thing and then it just leaks between all the panels, and it's just like, what a lost opportunity, right? Like, how's that for a customer experience? Not only does it just rain lightly, it pulls on the panel edges and soaks you. So I've got strong views, and like every system we do is waterproof. And the thing about waterproofing is most of the systems use an EPDM rubber.
Yes.
So effectively you've got the panels and they've effectively sealed between all the panels with a rubber gasket.
Rubber being hydrophobic, pushing the water away.
Yeah, and blocking that gap. But
exactly.
I mean, we tried when I did my first few trial sites to use rubber, and it's extremely difficult to make it waterproof on the first day, let alone a year later once the rubber's deteriorated and expanded thermally.
But you need something to allow for the thermal expansion of the aluminium frame, don't you? Because, things contract and expand and they...
Exactly,
So you need something flexible.
You need space, for it to expand. So what we do is our module mounting system sits underneath. And effectively, it's like a micro gutter system that sits underneath the panels. So if you try to visualize it, if you look at that, they've still got gaps in between. It's kind of like a top hat section that's turned upside down, right? And the water flows off the panel edge and then effectively goes into a C section, which effectively collects the water. And we have it on all four edges of the panel. And there's a few benefits to it. One is you don't rely on rubber gaskets. And like I said, the thing's meant to last 30 years and it's 70 degrees Celsius in extreme UV. And the longevity of rubber is a hard one to go hand on heart. That thing's not going to leak. And, like I said, the first ones we did that have rubber, they leak like sieves. So that's why we went away from it. The other thing that's really cool is a lot of systems, in terms of replacing a panel, that's a real thing that you need to do, right? Like it can be a big hailstorm or something like that. And everyone always asks like, how does it work with hailstorms? It's like, well, they've got a hail rating. The glass is a hail rating.
And but if the hail's this big, nothing's good.
Yeah. It's like, what does your house look like? Your house also needs to get replaced. What's the hail rating of your car? Like these are all things that they can take a bit of hail and then there's some point where they can't. But we can replace any panel in the array by undoing 4 nuts.
Fantastic.
And undoing the MC4 connectors, which is really cool because most of the other systems you slide them in from the outside. So if I've got a panel in the center of my array, I need to remove every single adjacent panel, including the rubber gaskets, replace it, and then reinstall the whole waterproofing on all the panels. And obviously that's a massive pain in the ass. Whereas if you can just replace a panel by just, like I said, four nuts and 2 MC4 connectors, no gaskets, no module mounting, that's all you need to do.
My God, it must have taken a long time to get that system to be completely waterproof.
Yeah.
I can imagine what size, how close to the panel.
And like so many systems that leaked, like in our prototypes. And, I reckon I've gone through 25 different, iterations of the module mounting system to make it work. One thing that we've been working on is... have you got into 3D printing at all? Like, have you seen some of the stuff you can do?
He's got a little 3D printer and he's made a couple of little things, but tiny one.
Yeah.
People are making houses out of them virtually, aren't they?
They're so cool. Anyway, there's this company called Bamboo Labs that make this next generation 3D printer. They're all these ex-DJI guys, so the guys that make the drones.
Right.
And in drone manufacturing, there's obviously a lot of 3D printing, right? Because you're trying to prototype ideas and do that.
Right.
And they basically just went, geez, these 3D printers, they're cool, but they always break down and they don't work and blah, blah, blah. We reckon we could make a better 3D printer. So they went on Kickstarter and they basically, out of Kickstarter, we've got this idea about a whole end-to-end ecosystem for 3D printing that just works. You don't get spaghetti failures. You don't get the, plastic melting off. You don't get all these issues that plague 3D printers. To date, it just works. So we bought one. Right? They're not that expensive, like $2,000. They're actually cheaper now. And it's amazing what you can 3D print. And now we actually use 3D printers not just for prototyping, but we actually use it for mass production of consumable items on the pod. So for example, spaces that we have that space the panels exactly the right distance away from each other, 3D print them. They cost like 15 cents each.
Wow.
Packers between the pods when
And
we
they got
stack
a
it on the truck.
good lifestyle.
Yeah, really good PETG. So basically plastic.
What's that?
Well, it's, I don't know, some plastic
Okay.
acronym.
Yeah,
but it's basically what your plastic drinking bottle's made out of. So plastic drinking bottles are PET, G is like glycol or something like that makes it a printable substance. But it's good. It's, it's water resistant, it's UV resistant, and it's not a structural component. We just use it as like a temporary spacing.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
There's this other thing we use.
So it doesn't go to site?
No, it does. It goes on the pod.
Okay.
We fix it in to the product and it goes to site and stays there, and the packers we normally return. But it's really cool. You can print them different colors. You can, you can put naming on it. And look, if you decide you're going to change your design, chuck them in the bin and then make new ones for the next one. So there's this iteration cycle where I can 3D print, usually in a day, 3 different iterations. So I print something, it doesn't quite fit. Okay, print another one, doesn't fit. Okay, cool, this is perfect. Done. And then I go, cool, let's print 1,000 of them.
So in the old days, to do that same thing without a 3D printer, 3 iterations, how long would that have taken?
Oh, age. Like you'd be
realistically,
like months, because you got to wait for it to get made, depending on what you're making. Like think about an injection molding piece. Like we looked at injection molding. It's about 3 months to do it. Plus the tooling cost is about $5,000.
Right.
For a small component. The other thing we started using is we needed like a gasket to seal between effectively where two of the gutters met at a 90-degree intersection. And we were trying to use silicone and we're having lots of issues trying to waterproof this critical joint. And we thought, why don't we try and 3D print effectively like a lost form piece that can go in there that we can then Sikaflex in. So we went through all these prototypes and we can now basically mass 3D print our own proprietary sealing component. And it's pretty cool. It's got like little, like channels in it that you inject the Sikaflex and then it pops out. You got like a witness hole where it pops out so you know it's sealed. But it's super cool because, we use this material called ASA, which is like really high UV resistance, really long lifespan. And the component's tiny, like it's the size of a 50-cent coin. So I can print about 200 of them per print. So we've got 4 3D printers at the factory and our designer's based in Orange with his own 3D printer. He basically prototypes on his printer and then he goes, cool, yep, it's production spec, I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
And then he'll just remotely log in and print it on the other 4 printers.
Oh, wow.
And then, overnight, it's all ready to go.
You come in the morning and go,
they're all there. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
The hardest work at Canyon Solar is those 3D printers.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's just like, and this is what's cool about starting a company that obviously doesn't have all the kind of baggage or momentum of the way things have been done. You kind of look at problems and go, well, how do I solve it now? What's different now? 3D printers, well, let's look at that. AI, how do we build something and instead of having a whole admin team and all these traditional ways of doing it, how do I leverage myself with the technology that exists now and look at the mega trends of the way things are heading? These 3D printing and AI will only be bigger in the future. So I might as well get in on the ground level now and grow with it, rather than have to make a knee-jerk reaction in 5 years when I'm a lagger and everyone else is, 10 steps ahead of me.
Proactive as opposed to reactive.
Yeah, you've got to lean into change, right? Like there's obviously, I know change can be hard and scary and stuff, but time and time again, if you don't lean into it, you get left behind and you become obsolete.
Now, we've talked about your business model and we've talked about where you're putting these systems in. Now, obviously, you've looked at other areas, not just shopping centres, not just the car parks of supermarkets. What about schools? Or are they a bit too small? The shaded area, the shade cloth. Yeah. Especially in Queensland where they have massive areas of shade cloths over there. Is that too small for you? Or
we've looked at it. They call them COLAs, covered outdoor learning areas. Which I've had a brief look at. I think for us, the main thing is the car parks are just such an untapped market.
Yeah.
And, the size of these things are huge. Like there's some projects we're looking at that are 2,000 parking spaces.
Oh my gosh.
So if you're fitting 3 kilowatts per car space, that's 6 megawatts. It's basically like a solar farm.
Yeah, right.
And
Keep you busy.
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And they're ridiculous. And the cool thing with prefabrication, and this is why we play in big sites, is the benefits of prefabrication only grow with size. And what I mean by that is,
economies of scale.
Economies of scale, because you do a small system, and because we need more transport and there's more mobile plant and big cranes. And if I've got a really small system, yes, it's a bit quicker to install, but all my fixed costs of just getting there and designing it mean that we're not that competitive compared to the in-situ competitors we have. But when we get to the big end of town, right, and we're doing a 6 megawatt system, and the competitors are saying, well, it would take 6 to 8 months to build it, right? And we'll do it in 6 to 8 weeks. That's where you get a massive saving.
Wow.
And that's where you can really make a difference. And on both what you can sell it for and what the client sees in terms of, well, I've got 2,000 parking spaces out of action. If you can do it in a third of the time or a quarter of the time, that means so much to my bottom line in terms of, the impact to the store revenue.
Wow. What states are you? I mean, are you going as far as Darwin? I mean, I used to live in Darwin. I'm going, oh my gosh, for a very short time,
I'd love
long
to do
enough to
something in
experience the heat and the humidity. But I mean, I tell you what, it's a harsh environment up there, and that's. I mean, obviously Queensland.
It's a good question. I mean, it kind of goes back to transport. Transport's a really big killer.
The tyranny of distance.
And it means that it's difficult to do. If the project's big enough, it makes sense. But for most projects like WA and NT, it's too far away. It's too far away, unfortunately. The other thing, which isn't a massive issue, but the wind region also changes. So if you go to Brisbane, is wind region B. If you go to far north Queensland, wind region C, which is basically cyclonic, and Darwin. And then if you go to the Pilbara, it's the only area in Australia that's wind region D.
Really?
Yeah, which is crazy. Like it's like 200 kilometre plus winds you're designed for. Like it's extremely, which is fine. Like we can design our system, we make the steel bigger, we can reduce our spans and stuff, but it makes it harder to do. And I mean, the good thing is, provided you like shade, right, which most of these places do, right? Far North Queensland, I'd want some shade as well. What does the shade cloth cost? Same thing. You still need bigger steel, you still need, you've still got those costs there, so it kind of scales linearly.
Yeah,
it was actually interesting. I was up in Cairns last year. You been to Cairns?
Yeah.
Great spot.
Times,
Great spot. Super hot.
I like warm weather.
Yeah.
Why am I living down here?
I don't know. But I was up in Cairns and I went, obviously I'm always looking at Carparks, which is pretty, lame pastime. But I remember going to a big supermarket there and they had the shade cloth, but there was no cloth. It was just steel. And what happens is in wind region C areas, they don't design the shade cloth to have the wind rating to survive the hurricanes and stuff that come through.
No.
So what they do is they either remove them beforehand, right? They literally go up and they remove the shade cloth, and take it down, and then they put it back up once that cyclone's passed through.
That'd be a huge job.
Yeah, like it's crazy to think, and I don't know if this one got ripped off or it got taken down and never put up, but it's just a very hot car park with some, the relics of the shade cloth, which is all the structural steel, hanging in the air, providing no shade. So I see areas like, especially like wind region C areas, like we can design our system to be wind region C and you don't need to remove it. A hurricane comes through, like it's got that wind region C design. I mean, we haven't built one yet. We'll see how it fares, but like there's no reason you can't design a solar canopy that can take the wind loading required to be in a wind region C or D.
Wow. So off camera, we were talking, you mentioned about a sawtooth system from a solar canopy perspective. And can you explain what that looks like and the additional coverage, it seems,
Yeah, sure. Like, I mean, the reason... One of the biggest cost drivers for solar canopies is the number of foundations, right? You could almost just like, if I was to work out what the cost is, it's like how many columns are there and how many kilowatts am I getting per column?
Right.
Because every column is a foundation, it's structural steel, It relates to how many pods you have because we span between the structural steel. So it's been a big focus of us is like, how can we get just the highest number of kilowatts per column or foundation? The really cool thing about Sawtooth is typically our system just covers the parking bays, right? So it doesn't cover the traffic aisles,
right?
Just basically where you park. And that works well. I mean, that's where you want shade, really.
Yep.
But what we've found is with some of these systems, well, what if we, instead of just covering the parking bays, we extended the length of the rafters and we had them meet kind of like in a kind of, at like an arch point in the center of the traffic aisle.
Right.
And we covered the whole thing with solar. So it's almost kind of like the 5B system that kind of pulls out. It's like the whole thing's just lots of triangles effectively of solar. And we've done some pricing on it and it's really cool. So there's two big benefits. One is you fit like 30% more solar capacity on a given car park.
Wow.
So,
that much?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because the traffic aisles are pretty wide. They're
Cool.
like 5 meters wide. So you can fit way more solar capacity on. So which is good. Most sites want more solar capacity. The second benefit is I don't need any more columns. I can span that distance with the structural steel.
Right.
So all of a sudden, for a very minor increase in cost, right, which might be, say, 5% in terms of more structural steel and pods and stuff, I can get a huge increase in my solar capacity. So what that means is I'm effectively reducing my dollar per watt pricing.
Wow,
and it's something that we've looked at doing for big energy consumers, and when they're getting sold on power purchase agreements, it's really effective because PPAs, they're great for rooftop solar and they're really easy to stack up. And $1.20 per watt, I can give you a PPA that's easily going to undercut your power rate that you're paying at the moment. Solar canopies are hard because they cost like almost 3 times as much as rooftop solar. So I've got to do a 30-year agreement or my price is higher and no one wants to pay more for electricity.
No, no, they don't.
But as we've been able to reduce the cost of our system in general through things like prefabrication and reduce site time and also really push the limits. It's like, well, how much solar can I get per column? And if you can reduce that cost another 20 to 25% by going, we'll do a sawtooth design now. And then the other thing is like I minimize my trenching because the whole thing's now connected. So I reticulate all my cable over ground and then I just have one trench that goes back to the building and back to the switchboard. So all these things mean that, you can just have these huge systems like, 500 kilowatts plus and, your dollar per watt turnkey is like $2 to $2.50 a watt. Whereas most systems are more like $3 to $3.50 a watt. So you got both working for you. You got size, which is important. The bigger it is, the lower the cost because all your fixed costs become a really small cost component. And I've got my kilowatts per column. So both things help. So size is a big one. And then with size comes, obviously that dollar per watt stuff. And then the sawtooth, is also an enabler by just reducing the number of columns for a given system size.
So if you increase the solar capacity, which with a set consumption load profile of the supermarket means potentially there's more energy potentially going to the grid. But as we talked about off camera a little bit and on camera, the whole energy storage, BESS side of things, energy arbitrage combined with increased electrical consumption from the EVs. It sounds like this is definitely the way to go.
Oh, 100%. And look, it also helps with the customer experience. All of a sudden, I can walk in the traffic aisles, I don't get wet, I don't get sun. It actually, so all these things snowball. And most of the sites honestly have such ridiculous energy consumption, you still don't need batteries. Like think about a hospital, huge. We put a system in for AstraZeneca recently and it's like maybe a few % of the energy that we're, producing with like a 400 kilowatt system, like they're just so big. Yeah, exactly. They're this massive sink of power.
Wow.
Airports are another one. Huge amounts of power. And as we get further and further into the energy transition, all the good rooftops are taken.
The roof real estate will get. That's right.
Filled it up.
Absolutely.
Like the average Woolly site, like they put on rooftop solar, they max it out, right?
Yeah.
All the solar they can do, and it normally offsets around 10% of their load for that site.
Yeah, right.
Right, and we're talking about getting to 40% before even batteries or export become a thing. And the great thing about solar canopies is typically you can fit twice as much in your car park than you can on your roof.
Yeah, right.
Because they're big, open areas. Normally the footprint of the car park's kind of similar to the store, but I don't have HVAC equipment. I don't have bad bad roof angles. I don't
Yes.
have, edge zones that I need to protect and shading. I just have a big open car park that I can install as much solar. And if you go, that's not even with a sawtooth design. If I then do a sawtooth design in the car park, it's probably 2.5 to 3 times as much solar that I can fit on.
Wow.
And then you're really having a big impact because you're going, well, I've got 10% on the roof and I can fit another 20 to 30% in the car park. Now we're talking. Now we're starting to get some really big dents in terms of that energy profile.
Wow. What pitch are we talking about with the let's say the standard, the non-sawtooth system?
Yeah.
Do you have a set pitch that?
Yep.
And what's I assume
8 degrees.
8 degrees.
Yep.
So
And we do it for both. So 8 degrees is great because 8 degrees panels are self-cleaning in inverted commas at 10 degrees.
Yes.
8 degrees is good enough.
Yes.
10 degrees we find is a little bit excessive because the higher you make it and the more aggressive you make the pitch, the less shade you get.
Yes,
So-
of course.
so
The
there's-
surface area. Yeah.
So the advantage is trying to find a good line there. But yeah, 8 degrees works really well, and for most of the systems like cleaning, like the panels are clean with 8 degrees. The water basically washes away the debris and things like that.
So you can standardise that, and that'll be for Victoria to Queensland.
Yep.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense because.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had to go, oh no, well for this state we'll make it this, and no, you couldn't do it. Like that. That'd be ridiculous.
And like the name of the game is standardization, right?
Yes.
Like how can you minimize the number of SKUs, the number of everything? And if I want to set up a production line to make 100 pods a day, I want to make them all the same. And you look at car parks. Car parks are all very, very similar. There's an Australian standard for car parks. They're all 5.4 meters long,
Right.
and they're between 2.5 to 2.7 meters wide. That's it. Like what else are we talking about? Yes, there's traffic, trolley bays, and there's disabled parking, and there's some minor changes, but ultimately they're all extremely similar. So they should have a similar solution. And if you want bespoke, there's heaps of companies out there that can do bespoke. And you can pay the premium for it, but most, as we know, with commercial, they want the most cost-effective solution possible that improves the experience for their customers. And if you can install it really quickly and have a really cost-effective system, that is usually what they want.
This is really interesting. Now, I've got to ask you about water.
Yes.
Like every 1 mil of rain hitting 1 square metre of whatever it is will produce 1 litre of water.
Yes.
Now, what in that hierarchy of needs, you're talking about air, water, food, shelter, energy, or energy shelter.
Yeah.
How many of your customers have said, I really would like to, I want to recycle the water, collect the water.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a system that's actually already collecting the water, taking it away from the panels and down. It's going somewhere.
Yes.
Where's it going, and why isn't it going into some kind of...
It's a really good question. I mean, typically we just basically either reticulate it to the existing stormwater pits on site, or we just discharge it to the ground and have effectively a downpipe every column and disperse that local rain concentration. Because there's nothing worse than collecting 80 car spaces worth of water with one downpipe, unless it's going into stormwater, right? Otherwise, you disperse it. I think we haven't done a site yet where we've collected the water. I think the reason for that is, if you want to collect the water, you obviously need a big tank to put it in.
Correct.
Right? I'm in a car park that's very limited.
Yes.
If I delete a car space,
Physical size,
they'll have my throat. So you need to minimize. They want exactly the same number of parking spaces, right? And often they need that as a DA requirement. So I think for more remote or regional sites where they've got more space, or they're on tank water or something like that,
or the value of water goes up,
it's kind of like, well, what's it going to cost me in real estate to put in this water tank, or cost to put one underground? Like we're looking at one out in Griffith at the moment, and they're looking at doing that. I mean, Griffith is extremely hot, and they're going, well, we're actually going to put water tanks in already. This is the perfect thing that we can just pipe it. But the good thing is you can add it later. Like as long as you're collecting the water, I can put it here in the storm water.
Oh, I can put it over there.
Put it in there in the tank.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you want to do it later, you're not excluded from doing that.
Because I see, like, obviously we talked about like a solar canopy system. In no particular order, it is shading people. It's creating a nice microclimate so people don't get rained on or affected by the sun, and it's producing energy.
Yes.
And at the same time, by default, it is collecting whatever comes down from the heavens.
Yeah.
So where it goes now is determined by that economic imperative.
Yeah. There's always a benefit. Like it's like if it's hot, you're protected. If it's raining, you're protected. If it's dark, you have lighting, you know? So you have all these different things to solve for that are really nice. If you need to charge your car, you can do it. Even like CCTV, that's like a big thing that pretty much all our systems end up putting in. And you can really easily, provide a really secure environment because you got good CCTV. There's probably heaps of stuff happening with, well, how do we use that data? Can we start to see? It's a bit scary.
That's a conversation for another time, Will.
It's a bit scary, but like even just useful things of like I can detect violence in the car park, or I can detect there's a fire, I can detect all sorts of things, or I can even just start to use it to go, well, do people park under this, and how long do they spend if they park under the solar canopy compared to somewhere else? So the data play is interesting. I think it's really not done yet. But like I said, you put the Trojan horse in, which is solar canopy, and you can bolt so much stuff to that. I mean, one of the last things we were looking at is, and we did this at All Energy last year, advertising screens.
Well, I was actually thinking of that. Yeah. I was actually thinking that, yeah.
I'm actually, yeah. So, and look, Jolt obviously got a really good system what they do with their EV charging, but like, yeah, it's so low cost to add in the advertising screen once you have the infrastructure there. I've already got the power. I've already got the column. It's undercover, so it's not in the rain or in the sun.
Wow.
And how many eyes that see? And you'll be surprised. Like advertising to me, to be honest, is not exciting until they go, oh yeah, you can do that screen and you can make like 30 grand revenue from a screen per year. And you go, hold the phone.
Hang on, how many columns are there?
Yeah, exactly.
How many screens?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And you go, wow, like that, you do that twice, that's worth as much as the electricity savings for your average site, and it's that whole thing. How do you value stack it? It's not just solar, it's not just shade, but it's EV charging, CCTV, advertising. You can create this whole ecosystem that's a really compelling, value add to a car park. And look, all the retailers, they're trying to move into the future and make themselves stay relevant. And what a good way if you can make that customer experience. It all comes back to that. How do you make that customer experience amazing? And how do you monetize that?
So much to think about. Now, you're in business. You're not 30 yet, are you?
I am actually. I'm 30. I'm 33.
Wait. So you're 33.
Yes.
And what advice do you have for someone like a young engineer who's thinking about getting involved in renewables? Yeah. Maybe manufacturing. Not competing against you, by the way, but doing something in renewables. What kind of advice would you give them if they're thinking of starting some kind of business?
I think, it's a really good question. I think working in the industry underneath someone else was extremely valuable in terms of what works and what doesn't. I think I'd find it really hard if I just left uni and went, I'm going to go start a renewable energy company. Like I already made enough mistakes, let alone if I had no experience in the industry or how you work and professional culture and all those kind of things. So I think that's really difficult. I definitely, maybe some people want to go do that and it works with a software company because you're just coding and I think with software it's a bit easier to have those crazy startups. With hardware, it's much slower. There's a lot more relationships you need to build, professional rapport, network. Like it's a slower, harder scale, and you need a more well-rounded skill set to achieve that. So I think especially for hardware businesses, like how many hardware businesses have been started by college dropouts? Not really any I know of. Most of them are software companies. Yeah,
good point.
So I think it's really important to get some industry experience. The other thing is, when you're young, what is the downside? I remember thinking about this. I was going, okay, I've got a job here. If I quit my job and start something, what is the worst case scenario? And I went, worst case scenario is it doesn't work, right? I make no money, and I start again. You've
got plenty of years to redo. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a learning thing. It's how much more will I know from that 12 months? That's the other thing. I said, if I work in a job, right, sure, I can make some money, but I definitely won't have that learning curve I would have if I went there, failed, tried different things. And at least when I went back to the company, if I did fail, I went, business isn't for me, kind of like you were saying before. Business isn't for me. I've tried it, don't want it. It was a good experience. And I'm sure you use those experience you had in your own business and trying your own thing, now working for another corporate. Yep. So I don't, it's kind of like, what is the downside? It doesn't have to be forever. There's heaps of people that start businesses, they don't work or they pivot or they end up joining the workforce again. And it's like, have you got that golden opportunity while you're young to go do it? And I guarantee you, you'll be a more attractive hire for someone that's tried to do something and failed, rather than someone that just is, just moves from business to business, because you just can't get those learnings in a corporate environment most of the time. You just need to go see it for yourself.
Now, mate, we've covered heaps, but obviously we could talk about a whole lot more. But Ayuka has mentioned that the hard drive is quickly filled. This has been the longest podcast we've ever had. I'd like to finish off with asking you if anyone's interested, they're listening to this podcast or watching it or both,
sure,
and they're going, wow, I work for a supermarket. I'm involved in a shopping centre. I'd like to know more about these solar canopies and what Canyon Solar actually does. What's the best way to contact you?
I think, I reckon that sounds really general, but do your research first, I think, and just find out a bit more about the company. We've got a website, you can go check it out. I think it's always really good. I've had a few people reach out, but you don't want to have a conversation where people go, oh, what does Canyon Solar do? And what projects do you do? And it's that information is all actually quite readily accessible.
Yep.
Go check it out. And if you want to reach out to me, the easiest way is, I think I've got my phone number on the website, so you can probably give me a call or just send me an email. We've got all our details on there, and we can meet up. I've really enjoyed talking to heaps of people that have reached out, and we have a coffee date, and it's great. Quite often nothing comes of it. Sometimes something does, but it's really cool. And I think everyone has a part to play, right? Through that whole value stack. You think about how many different stakeholders are involved in getting this thing off the ground. And if if you're passionate about making a difference and you can contribute to that, 100%, let's chat. It's always great having a chat, and it goes both ways. I always learn a lot as well. And hopefully, they learn a bit more about what we do and how we fit into the puzzle.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been, I say this with all sincerity, an absolute pleasure. It's the longest podcast ever. Wow. My brain's reeling with a lot because I'm thinking of all the stuff you've said and everything else. So, yeah, thanks very much, man.
No worries. It was a pleasure being here, and thanks so much for having me.
No worries.
Cheers.
We'll do a bit of a shake.